Hey, is this thing on? Lance, Nick, ready? Can you hear me? Welcome to the Live Free and Hunt podcast. Whoa! It's been a while. We're back.
We are finally back, everyone. I know it's been a little break here, but we're going to start rolling off the rest of this year, doing more podcasts and stuff. Just finally locking down on some things, guys.
Yeah, we've been busy.
So,
we had our summer break, and we're going to get back to 2 podcasts a month. Today is July 10th. We had Mutzi, Nate, Justin. We talked, we recapped a little bit of turkey season, talked some bear baiting, and we got in some whitetail tactics.
Yep, got a lot of whitetail tactics.
Yeah. Some tracking.
Yeah, altogether, it was just a great group of guys. They've hunted a lot around Maine, Massachusetts, and New Hampshire, and they've shot a lot of nice deer, and they just know how to get it done, I guess.
Stone cold killers.
They just get it done on the ground, and in the tree. But
we had a blast hanging out with those guys tonight. It was fun.
Yeah.
And hopefully we link back up here shortly.
Definitely catch back up with them. But heck yeah. So let's get this on the roll.
Let's do it.
Like a bad deck of cards that loves to lose. You don't listen to me, and I don't want you to, 'cause we sure have fun throwing my money away. You bet high, I bet low. You're all in and I'm all broke. Another paycheck down the drain.
Live Free and Hunt podcast episode. I don't even know
Something.
what it is. It's been, we've had our summer break. Everybody's been busy besides Nick. What you been doing, Nick?
Working on the Camaro.
Working on the Camaro. I've been busy with work, kids sports, behind the 8 ball with putting cameras out, scouting. Haven't got in the woods at all. Lance, been busy with work.
Yeah, it's just nothing but terrible.
Yeah,
It's
awful.
been nothing but
Yeah.
terrible. Just side
Generally,
work
we're in
and
the
lead
woods.
work and-
We're in the woods, and then have some cameras out. Kind of have an inventory of what's where. And this year, nothing. So, hopefully,
we'll still pull the trigger on something.
yeah.
Something's dying.
Well, hopefully, we'll figure something out. So, who do we got on today? We'll go around this way. Who do we got here?
Nate Fenderson.
There you go. Lance, obviously.
Bouchard?
Yep.
Justin
Thibodeau.
Mark Mathieu.
Mark Mathieu. So I think we're gonna bullshit about some hunting stories. I want to get into tracking, and bear season's coming up. So if we can talk about a little bit of maybe selecting a bait site or a good area to
Look towards.
I think you have a few around here. I'm not sure.
yeah, yeah, right, yeah. When you're setting up a bait site, what do you guys gravitate? If you look at a map, what do you gravitate first to, like, for starters?
I look at mass crop, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Like sometimes they'll call the bell just in the area where it is, depending on where it is, see what type of mass crops are in the area. We do a lot of looking at the maps, topos. I like wet areas,
Yeah.
especially during the heat and stuff. I find a lot of those big bears, they like to be in that wet, boggy areas,
Just
and they're
laying
coming
down
out of
in
it.
there all
Yep.
day.
They lay in there all day, and then they come out and they go to feed and they go right back down in again.
Yeah.
So those are kind of the big areas that we try to look for. Honestly, the biggest thing is looking for permission.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's our biggest issue also. But I've always heard, like, you got to get into some old timber or dark timber and
Swamps.
yeah,
I like swamps.
yeah. Justin, pull your mic up just a little bit. Is that thing?
Yeah, dude. What the heck?
I have the loudest voice here, so
So when you kind of zone into a spot there, like you said, is either wet and near mass crop, what do you do to a bait site to make it where they want to come in, to where you want them to come in?
See, part of the key is with bear hunting, and I've always found this, and I've baited for years in Maine and New Hampshire, is bears will go pretty much where you want them to go with the bait, sight, and scent. We tend to, and some people will disagree with this, but me, Tibbs, and Mark, we've done this a lot, is we've had sites that are up high, and because you got those thermals and that scent goes down over the hill, those big bears and stuff will go up there and they'll come right back down with those thickets. But we like to, like I said before, we like being near those wet, boggy areas outside of those where the oaks or the beeches are, wherever the mass crop is going to be. And, try to keep it to where there's areas that you don't want to be set right up in the thickest thing there is, because bears are pretty elusive. You won't hear them come in generally. You'll be turning around. You look all over the place, and all of a sudden you look and there's a bear. You just looked through there 5 minutes ago, and there's nothing, and all of a sudden there he is. And they'll cover quite a distance. So we kind of look for open areas to set up in off the thickets. And once the bears get comfortable with it, what we found, especially in New Hampshire, is because you can't bait till the first day of the summer, you can hunt.
Yeah.
And putting the cameras in, as soon as that bear hits that bait and it's a bear that you want to harvest, that's when you want to sit there, because he's the most comfortable coming in, and you'll catch him off guard coming in. And the key is you'll catch other bears coming in. So we use a lot of like grease. Violated grease, bacon grease. Yep. And what we do with that is we spread it all around the ground in front of the bait site. And everybody's like, well, why would you do that? Well, you're leaving a scent trail. When they get it on their pads and their paws and they're walking those trails, other bears come in. I mean, you're going to have raccoons and stuff like that come in.
That still helps.
But that helps because they're leaving scent trails everywhere.
Yeah.
And, so that's some of the stuff that really has worked well for us.
Have you ever had an issue with your backdrop? I've heard that they want to come downhill or uphill if you're in a scenario like that. Is there any? You ever had an issue with that, where you kind of feel like there's a bear up there, but he just won't come in till dark because of the terrain?
Yeah, we've had that before. I mean, some of the things that we do, though, is especially with the cameras and stuff, you'll see that some of those bigger bears will actually they'll wait just before you get out. What we do then is we'll follow the bear trails back. And, generally you can kind of see where the bigger bears come through, and we'll go up in a climbing tree stand 50, 75 yards from the actual bait site. Yeah. And when that bear comes in his comfort zone and you're off the side of his trail, he comes in and gets hung up. It's almost like hunting a big buck.
Right, yeah.
Same thing. We've done that, and we've harvested some really big bears that way that get hung up, that don't want to come in, and it's worked out pretty good for us.
Good deal. I totally skipped over turkey season here, and I know everybody's
went right to bear baiting. Bear baiting.
Yes, because turkey season was kind of shit for us, but
we had a lot of birds just not wanting to work. A lot of quiet mornings, even though it seemed like a lot of people had a lot of success out there. We just didn't. We just seemed.
It's just us.
Yeah. It's us. It's because Tibbs and Mutzy, they killed them.
Yeah.
There's always one more.
Yeah, I know, but it's just. Yeah, we just had a trouble season just with getting birds to kind of talk after they hit the ground and just stay vocal with us.
It's as soon as you think that I am the turkey guy, I can just call in any bird, whatever, they'll kick you right in the nuts, because guess what? It didn't happen. We set up our first setup of the day. There's a spot. Opening morning. There's a spot that we've hunted for, I don't know, since I was probably 7 years old. The birds are in the not the same tree, but same area every single morning, and you can catch a gobble and then make a move. And guarantee. It's never not been that. Well, this year was that. It was different.
They were more scared of the decoys, it seemed. Even just being opening day, even though we had a pile of jakes that came down first, and they saw that hen decoy, and they're just like, yeah.
Alarm putt.
See you later. Yeah, alarm putt. I'm like, what happened? It's like...
I was like, they saw the camera. They saw you. They saw somebody.
Way over there, yeah.
These birds, they change day to day, too. I mean, you can hunt a gobbler one day, and then it'll be so hard to kill. Come back in the next morning, and boom, he's right on you.
That's what I feel like. Is if you're going to kill the bird, this weekend or this year, it started on a Saturday, right?
Yeah.
So that was tough, because usually it's like a Thursday or something, and you can go in there and get your first bird at least.
Yeah, before everyone else is out. Saturday.
But like you said, I think as soon as you hunt a bird, it's they get pressured, and then they disappear. Or they make different moves.
We had one bird in a neighborhood, kind of it was big woods in there. We call it the neighborhood, but 3 years in a row, same bird.
And he's still alive.
Oh, yeah?
Well,
that's not good.
Well, there was another one with
That's a smart bird.
There was another one with it, and I had missed it. We know it's the same bird because it was just, did the same thing every day.
Right.
And then one day we went, in 10 minutes, it was over. Came right in.
Yeah,
Just like that.
Yeah.
Just
he
just
gets
by the
set
day.
up, his turn to shoot. I just get behind him,
Right.
make a few calls. They'll come that distance until they start getting nervous.
Yeah.
So if your caller and shooter are separated, it makes a big difference.
So you're setting your caller back.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't. We never use decoys.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
did one
We
time.
tried and it's just not working for us.
Yeah.
It's just
A lot of people.
getting in the woods and doing, like he said. And me and Nate, we do the same thing.
Strike a gobble and then.
Yeah, we strike a gobble, set up. The biggest thing is trying to determine where that turkey's going to go, because obviously, as you know, they're finicky on where they want to walk.
Yeah.
So
When you're going into a brand new spot, you make a call, you get a response. That's great, but you don't know if he wants to come your way.
Yeah.
So, you're trying to shorten it up, but you don't want to get picked off.
Right.
And they seem to be going away. And then you try to get around, and you either run out of road or you're in a
Or you get
posted
busted.
area or something.
Done that.
So sometimes some of these birds, it took us 3 or 4 attempts, different days, where we find, okay, they seem to be going that way. So
and their attitudes changed every day.
and we try to get around them, change a call, soften it up, because these birds are, now it's late in the season, they've heard a lot of
call
calls,
shy.
but always from the same places. These little pull-offs and things
Right.
like that.
Right. Where
That's
people
a
are always
good-
going in. Yeah.
So we
Well,
actually would walk in the woods a good 100 yards before we did anything.
Yeah.
Worst
Back
case
door
scenario,
approach.
You bust
we got to
them.
turn around and walk 100 out.
Yeah.
That's it.
I found this year using a Jake. It's almost like a kiki is the only thing I can tell you what it sounds like, but it's an actual Jake call, and it sounds like that. It's not a kiki, but it's a long type noise. And the first time I heard it happen in the woods was a Jake that did it, and I was like, man, something's wrong with that bird. But a big Tom come running at him, and I'm like,
Well,
wow.
it's 2021, so.
Yeah, well, it's true. It's true. You never know what's going on. I know we related to it. It's like I heard that, and I'm like, I wonder if I could do that. So I did it on a mouth call and tried it a couple times, and I actually had a couple Toms break to come in.
Yeah.
This year I was very fortunate. My son is in the Navy, and he was able to come home, which was really cool. He only had a few days to come in, and it's like Christmas when he comes in. Uncle Tibbs is like, dude, he's like, Uncle Tibbs is like,
Let's
Aunt,
go.
we're going to kill every turkey there is between Maine and New Hampshire. You're going to get them all. And so we go out, and it's funny. So we get in the spot, and we got these 4 giant Toms coming in, and we're trying to videotape too. So we got everything videoing. And I'm sitting next to him and telling him, no, don't shoot yet, because we want to get some good footage. And they're coming right in. And we got the 2 hens. They're laying down right in front of us. And these 2 big birds walk in. And then all of a sudden, here comes the other 2. And they're like 35 yards. And he's looking at me like, can I shoot? Can I shoot? And I'm like, no, not yet. This is great footage. This is great footage.
It's going to strut right here.
And they go in the strut, and I said, okay, when they go behind that tree and they come out, you can shoot.
Yeah.
Well, he doesn't say anything, and I'm like, he ain't shooting. What's going on? So when they went behind the tree, he couldn't see him.
Oh.
So they had spent like 30 minutes within 35 yards and then decided to
sitting
walk out. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So he's like, Dad, yeah, the next time when I get him that close, I'm just going to shoot him. So you hope you get the camera
Right.
on.
Yeah.
And I felt bad because I'm like, oh, you got to be kidding me. I'm like, he comes in, and his first morning, he got these, finally we had some birds come in, and he didn't get it. And then we go to the next spot, and where they had 20 minutes, a bird runs in and he misses it. And I'm like, you're in the military. You got like expert marksmanship. How did you miss it with a shotgun? And he's like, really, Dad? Really?
Yeah.
I started laughing. It was funny. But he ended up getting a couple good birds in Maine and a few misses in New Hampshire.
That's
I
pretty
think
good.
we've all done that. I myself did it this year. Twice.
Yeah, me
Pretty
too.
sure I speak for Mark too.
Oh, yeah, I woofed a nice one.
I don't want to show the picture.
See, I didn't hear.
No, don't.
You guys didn't tell me that. I get the pitches when you shoot one. I didn't get the storyline.
Oh, I got
a
a good picture of a monster Tom at like 25 yards, all puffed up. I'm able to get a nice still photo, and he missed it.
Yeah.
Looked it right
awesome.
over the head
Right
or
over its
something?
head.
Well,
Yeah.
he's coming uphill, kind of, and he's head on. And I'm like, well, I don't want to shoot him in the chest because I don't want to ruin the breast meat.
Yeah.
So I aimed just a touch higher and too close, and it whiffled right over.
Yeah.
his
You know I'm going to find the picture now, Mutzy.
Yeah.
Hey, well, if you guys have had this happen, so I got this big bird coming in, I'm videotaping him, using Tacticams on the guns and stuff,
Yeah.
and it's been pretty cool. And they're coming in, he's coming in, I shoot, and it was almost like I want to say he ducked, that's what I'll go with. And he runs out 10 feet, stops. Well, I only put 1 bullet in the gun. So now I'm trying to eject the shell, put another bullet in, and I'll be damned if that bird didn't stand there. And I finally got the shot, and I was able to harvest him.
Oh my God!
I called my wife up and I said, I don't know if he was just stunned or he was like, man, this guy really does not have another bullet in his gun. I gotta watch this, you know. But,
No,
yeah.
generally-
Obviously, the only time is when a bird comes in with another one and boom, and that other one hangs around. But no, I've never had a.
I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
I've seen them after you shoot and you miss or something. They kind of settle down. They're
Like, yeah, what was that?
What was that? And then,
Did you find it?
Oh,
Yeah,
don't
that's-
even.
Oh, yeah.
That is awesome.
That's the one he missed.
That is awesome.
We're in a nice, natural blind.
The good thing,
hidden-
the good thing, it was late enough in the season where he's probably still going to be there.
he made up for it.
I'll tell you, the one thing for us, though, and it's a big part of what we do,
This is right beside your house. This moose.
Oh, nice.
that was
Yep.
cool,
Perfect.
is taking youth out. So Youth Day. Every year, Maine, New Hampshire, we have youths that, our kids are growing up. Justin, thankfully, he's got a young boy that his son, we get to take out, and he's a slayer just like
I was going to say
Thibodeau.
he's a killer. I've seen some.
Oh, he's a slayer. He really is. And the kid is just awesome to be around. And it's like, I miss that because my son is old enough now where, he's a man. He's doing his own thing.
Right.
Where we don't have many kids. So any youth that we can find that we can take out, we spend youth days turkey hunting, deer hunting, you name it, just trying to get the youth out there and enjoy what we do.
Yeah. I mean,
Got to keep it going.
you have to, and it's the only way. Like, and turkey is a great way to introduce kids. Just to hear they're vocal, and then, we've talked about this number of times, but it's the best way to do it.
The weather's warmer.
Right.
The only thing is
yeah.
late in the season, it gets buggy. They don't like that.
Yeah.
But at least they're not sitting there freezing. And
Right.
sometimes you're moving, running, and gunning.
I've taken my kids out for youth weekend deer season, and it's just not they're still young, but it's just not the same because it's either cold and we're gonna stay here for how long? It's like well,
when are they coming?
yeah, it's tough. I know everybody listening to this podcast is probably turkeyed out on Turkey Talk, so I just want to recap on turkey season and let everybody know what we did and
Nothing.
how you guys did. But what is today? July
11th, I think.
10th. July 10th.
That was 10th.
Dang.
Gonna bring up the collage, Mutzi.
I was looking for it.
What have you guys? Do you guys put a lot of time and energy
The
into
collage?
pre-scouting?
This was
For
this
deer?
year?
Yeah.
For deer, so
Last 3 years.
I'll be honest with
Last
you,
2 years.
deer hunting is probably my single most, and I can probably speak for these two also.
It is my life.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
probably our biggest, turkey,
to my
bear, moose, all that stuff. It gets us to deer season.
The deer season. Yeah.
Deer season to us, it's almost like a religion. My wife would say, and she's laughed. She's like, I get on her. You're addicted to this.
Literally.
Like addicted to it. She's like, we're driving down the road. I'm like, oh, do you see that deer? Let's start. And I'm out there looking at it. And I'm like, I can put a camera in there. And there's probably a big buck and stuff. But now this time of year we're looking for areas for expanded archery or even archery in New Hampshire.
62 days.
See, he knows it right down. And he probably got the hours and minutes
60
down. But it's true. We live and breathe it. And, we've got cameras out right now running, and we're seeing the antler growth. We know they're early season. They're going to be pretty easy to pattern.
Yep.
And then as it starts to get a little later, they're going to get the pecking order straightened out. And then we really start focusing on key areas for big bucks.
So this is my issue is when you're putting cameras in the woods to find inventory, or if you put them over scrapes, so you're freshening scrapes up.
This is
I mean, right now we're just getting an idea of what's in the area. Everything's
Right.
going to change.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So you're just pretty much putting them out where you think they're going to be.
Trying
And
to get some hit lists.
You're gonna start. You'll probably be switching them around too. I'm guessing.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah. So it
So
isn't just
the issue that we stop with the phone. The issue that we're having, and I've always had, is you put a camera somewhere and you're like, all right, this looks like a good spot, and some of the time those deer will hang throughout deer season there, besides the rut,
you get a couple pictures of some good deer, but then that's it.
and that's it. But everything changes, and they line it up perfect with bow season because you get 1 week for those summer deer that you've been tracking, and then everything is different.
You get a
We notice that a lot.
It's pretty amazing too, though. Bow hunting early like we do, you notice deer actually start to rut earlier than you think.
Right.
I mean, I see scrapes in the beginning of September that most people think starts in October, but these deer are starting to ramp up pretty early.
Yeah.
I mean,
Do you think that is where you are hunting deer? If this is a main hunt that's expanded archery, do you think that's you see that all over the board, or do you see it in certain areas?
I'm only seeing it in that area because that's where
we're
keyed to have to hunt that
Depends
area.
how many deer per square mile too.
Yeah.
Big, and buck to doe ratio.
Right.
And obviously, you have different types of scrapes. There's scrapes that even they use all year long.
One they'll just do one and take off.
But
and with the scrapes, so I do a lot of scrape hunting. I do a lot of scrape. I put out a lot of scrapes. Last year I had 22 mock scrapes out. And I do this, and I start these, and the reason why I do it is because most people say, you're wasting scent because you're doing it early.
Nope.
I don't, because what happens is it's just like conditioning the deer to, once they start urinating in that scrape, they make it their own.
Yeah.
So I don't have to use as much scent. Once they get that, that becomes their natural scrape that they're using, I put the camera on, I'll have deer there all year long. And I put those in strategic areas.
And they're just good. They're coming through, they're checking in.
Pinch points.
Yeah.
Pinch points is where I put them because the deer are going to funnel through there. And a lot of times, if you can't find a licking branch and stuff, I'll make my own, or I'll hang a branch down out of a tree off a rope where they can get their antlers in it. I've got hundreds upon hundreds of pictures of deer, Mutzi, Tibbs, but all of us do, of deer hitting these scrapes. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean they're all going to be there during deer season, but it gives us an idea of when they're coming through, what's coming through, and it helps us really refine in where we want to be.
Right.
And I mean, he's talking about he did 22 scrapes. He could literally reuse those same scrapes. These deer are patternable.
Yeah.
If I'm saying that right. But they do the same thing every year.
Yeah.
And I mean, you take out a big buck, the next one in line is going to do the same
And
thing.
at some point, you probably don't have to make mock scrapes anymore because they're just going to take
they
it
make
over.
their own. That's what I'm,
The adult does in that area, if nobody's shooting them, they're going to raise their young there.
Mm-hmm.
And then when the bucks start getting curious, they're going to come and follow the scent from the
smartest deer in the woods is an adult doe.
Yep.
Yeah, it is.
And I've got a couple of spots where I've taken like a hemlock branch and tie wrap it to a spot on a hardwood because it's in a good spot for me. And boom,
so
pictures just start coming in.
No shit.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that branch will dry out and be junk. I'll just put a new one there next year, couple tie wraps, good to go.
As long as that's on the ground there.
If it's in a good spot,
It works well.
because the same smaller deer will come through there.
Yeah.
See, another key to some of this that we use is, so after deer season, and it hits January, February, right? You can go through the woods and you can see the deer trails and stuff like that. If there's no snow, you know what I mean? Or even after the snow melts, you can see all the deer trails, the old mock scrapes and everything. We inventory all that. We walk the woods looking for sheds, and we inventory, hey, you saw a scrape over here. We saw a rub line over here. And what happens is in those real thick areas, if we have permission on the properties, we'll ask if we can cut some trails through the swamps and stuff. And this is something that's really worked well for us, is we'll pick certain trees that we can get into with climbers or a regular set or even a ground blind, and we will make trails during the wintertime to intersect, and they will all cross in 1 point or 2 points, and then we go. And I'll tell you, what happens is during this time of year, that becomes their natural trails, their natural funnels, and they're all handmade by us to funnel them to where we want them to be. Putting those mock scrapes out, that's just another key and recipe to harvesting a really good deer.
Back to turkey season. That's huge for us. We use turkey season for scouting, but for also getting permission.
Yeah,
we see a place that's piles of deer tracks and whatever
they're
else.
droppings for the winter where they wintered there all
It's
in the
a
dark
good time
fur.
to talk to people. And try to get permission.
Sneak in, yeah. How like when I know you just talked about like wintering, like how much do you put that into your
scouting?
In your scouting, because I know it's kind of like when they are wintering, it's probably the tail end. If there's a lot of snow, it's the tail end of the season. And me and Lance during turkey season went into you can see the bark stripped off.
Yeah.
Again, it's more of an inventory thing. You're getting an
there's
idea
deer
of what's
in there.
but I mean, in a real bad winter or even a normal winter towards the end, those deer could have traveled 5 miles to find shelter and food. So you might see there's 2 or 3 big bucks there, but they're gonna be.
I'm always and there's the devil and the angel in my head. It's like during turkey season, you can see all.
Oh, look at this area.
Yeah, it's just late winter,
nice.
but I'm like, well, these deer always
But it gives you a general idea.
Yeah.
Of
there's deer there.
this pile.
Thibodeau brings up a good point, with inventory and stuff like that. But when you think about it, though, in the areas that we're hunting in southern New Hampshire and southern Maine, there's a lot of residential areas, right? Yeah. These deer don't have to travel as far to eat, right? So when you find those wintering areas, if you can do a circle on a map usually we stay within 5 to 10 miles, right? Do a 10-mile circle around it. And then look at the topo maps and your maps on Google Earth and start looking at the key areas where they would be. You can really define and refine where they're going to be and stop putting in mock scrapes and trail cameras. We'll move our trail cameras sometimes weekly, it seems like, if we're not picking up any activity until we can find the activity that we're looking for. But, yeah, I mean, that late season stuff, when the snow melts is a good indicator of what last year's sign was. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the same next year, but generally, if you guys have been hunting the same areas, most hunters, they hunt the same area year after year. Mm-hmm. It's the same type setup, right? So you're trying to refine in and figure out exactly where those deer are going to be and where you're going to get your opportunity to harvest the biggest buck that's there.
But sometimes just another 100 yards,
makes a difference.
You're going to come into an area, it's like, wow, how did I miss this?
God damn, that's the 100% worst thing I do, though. Like, if early, like, muzzleloader season, I'm not trying to sit in a stand. I'm just kind of poking, I'm still hunting. I'll sit here for a minute, and I'm like, all right. I'll walk, grunt a little bit, and I'm like, oh, what's over there? There's another. I'm next thing you know, I'm miles away from where I should be, where all the deer sign that I scouted was. But it's just one of those things.
I typically don't spend more than 30 minutes in a spot.
Yeah.
I find a spot where I think there's potential for a buck to be. That's all I do is call.
Bare ground.
Unless I'm tracking, I'm calling. And you can ask these. That's all I do.
Yeah.
And I've killed.
How often?
So many.
I want to go through archery season,
and
then I want to get into that bare ground, not tracking but still hunting, and then
that's
bow hunting. I'll tell you, bow hunting. One of the key things, and I tell everybody, if you want to make yourself a better deer hunter, get into bow hunting.
Absolutely.
Get into bow hunting because you're going to hear vocalization. You're going to see early patterns. You're going to see more deer. You're going to have to watch the deer versus pulling the gun up and shooting one.
Right.
And you learn so much by how deer move, how vocal they are, by when the rut comes in, all that stuff, by having a bow in your hand.
Right. And it's just like you're getting an extra month of scouting if you don't shoot one.
Cool little story, bow hunting last year on opening day when I killed that big 8. I had, a basket rack 6 come in. And then right behind that, there was another 8-pointer. And they were both decent deer. I think most people would have shot. And I was getting ready to shoot the 8-pointer. And I could hear a deer smashing a tree, raking its branches, and just tearing a tree up in the background. So I was forced to let these 2 deer walk by. And I was just like beside myself, like, oh my Lord, please let that be.
Am I making a mistake?
This is hard for me.
And when those deer were walking, they would look scared.
Yeah.
They were like looking back and kind of skittish. And I'm like, there's got to be something bigger. And then, it was the best decision I ever made. Those 2 deer got out of sight, and that deer, when it finished raking the trees, it followed those 2, stepped right out perfectly, 20 yards. That's
perfect
the big
shot.
Monster came out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But it's the cool things like that you see. I mean, there was 4. Ended up being 4 bucks.
Yeah, because generally you would never just
you
4 the first one and be done.
4 bucks together.
I got 3 kids. One's going in the freezer. Boom.
I mean, I was close. When you're expanded archery, it's pretty much anything you see goes. These places are
hunted hard.
Pockets. There's so many deer, and there's a ton of people hunting.
Yeah.
But the scent, like we had this one spot, we did a figure 8 scent round, early season, right?
Yeah.
And you're thinking that these deer are not going to, they're going to hit the scent, they're not going to come in. And I'll never forget it. I was talking to you guys, texting, because we all text each other on the phone. It's amazing. We're all, to get by the time, we're either playing video games on the phone or we're texting each other, like, hey, did you see anything? Or, hey, I just saw a giant buck, and, getting on each other, which is fun. And I'll never forget it. I was just talking to these guys, and I was saying, I hadn't got in the stand that much, and I finally got a night to hunt.
Right.
And I'm sitting there, and we're all talking. Hey, I saw a spike. Nothing. I saw a doe. Nothing. And my son had just texted me and said, Dad, hey, you seen anything? I'm like, nah. He goes, well, you haven't seen nothing. You might see a big one tonight. He goes, I bet when you stand up, there's going to be one right behind you. And I'm just laughing at him, and I heard something. I'll never forget it. I stand up, and I look, and there's a giant 8-pointer standing behind me, and I'm like, holy smokes. Now I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to stand up. You go through that whole thing. Yeah. And
Don't squeak your boot.
no, finally was able to get up and I shot. And it was just like Justin. He sends me the picture of his big buck. Well, I talked to him like 2 seconds before that, and he says, "Yeah, I'm going to get down. We'll go get some breakfast." And like 2 seconds later, he's like, "I just shot a giant buck." That's how quick it can happen.
Yeah.
I was about to get out.
He was. And then the thing is we're all like family, best buds and stuff. And it's like, yeah, you're messing with me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, send me a picture. You know what I mean? And he sends the picture, and I just about, holy smokes, I couldn't get to him fast enough. But, it was the same thing that night. I harvested that big buck. I hit him, and everybody comes down and celebrates.
Right.
That's
with
the
everybody,
thing.
we all hang together. We all share the stories, and it's just like you feel like you're part of that hunt. And that's
Like
the key.
that 220-pound one you got with your bow there in the field. Remember that? When
Now-
I shot a doe.
Yep.
And
Oh, that was
I'm
right.
coming out of my ladder stand. He's getting down to help me. And he stands up to go to get down, and $3 walk right underneath him.
Yeah, I
He ended up
get one.
shooting 220 pounder or
shit.
something like that.
Yeah, that's such a rewarding feeling, especially like we cut up our own deer.
I got Lance's whole family on a 108-pound buck.
Can't take it.
You guys don't have to
Everyone,
come,
my,
really.
yeah, my whole family pretty much showed up to the tagging
I go in
station
there like,
right
which
before.
one
They're
shot
like,
the
"Who
deer?"
shot the deer?" Like, we got a bunch of people here.
Like, where's
But-
the monster? No, it's the basket 6. But it's that
awesome.
thing, though.
But it's making those memories.
You know what,
Yeah.
man? A 4-pointer is a monster.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you enjoyed shooting it, that's all
If
that
the hunt
matters.
was
I'm not-
good,
Yeah.
that's all that
Hey,
matters.
Yeah.
how many times have we shot does and it's been like,
Oh, it's just
we're
as
on
fun.
top of the world?
Man, if you hear a leaf crack or
It's
crunch and it
heart
doesn't
is
make your
pumping.
heart go, then it's time to hang it up.
Yeah,
Right.
Another big part is just like we do all our field dress, butchering ourselves. So we'll
Yep.
bring it to one of the garages or something. We all just get
Yeah,
together and hang out.
we do the
bring
same.
kids.
Take the little one.
Couple
Yeah.
cold brewskis, you know?
Yeah.
Honestly,
Oop, there goes a finger.
I hang out at a barn. Well, we all hang out
Yeah.
there. My
mu-
dad
mutual friend of
introduced
ours.
me to
Yeah.
these guys
Yeah.
when I was a baby, and I've hunted out of that barn since I was a kid.
That's awesome.
Those guys, I still hunt with them. And they introduced me to this stuff. If it wasn't for any of those guys, I wouldn't be where I am now.
Yeah.
I just became an addict over it.
Yeah, it just
And,
depends if you want to
know,
go to the next level or not.
Right.
Yeah.
But we all meet there after hunting. We all hang our deer there, everybody.
Yep.
So sometimes there'll be 8, 9 deer hanging out front from all
Yeah.
different guys.
Yeah.
We hang out, we have a beverage and cook food and
Yeah. The food is awesome. He cooks all kinds of stuff. And it's just like we share all those stories.
yeah, the stories,
you
and
know.
it's just a laugh. I mean, we're in that barn till midnight sometimes.
Right. If it's like a hunt club atmosphere, there's nothing like that.
So
like,
the inside of that barn looks like this wall times 1,000.
Yeah.
I mean, we all put our deer heads in there.
you don't have to say anything about my wall.
No, but we all put our deer heads in there, and we all just. There's a story behind every one of them,
Right.
and you remember. It's amazing
Yeah.
what you can remember when
Especially-
you look at a deer head like that.
Yeah. It is.
But those
It is
guys,
wild.
man, they brought me up doing that. My dad and all the guys in that barn, and it's amazing. I still get to hunt with them.
Yeah.
That's the best part of hunting.
Yeah.
Is being there.
So rolling into, I guess, like the tail end of bow season and muzzleloader season.
Found them dead.
What are you guys doing on bare ground? Are you still hunting on the stands at that point?
Muzzleloader, to be honest, I bring a climber with me. We have climbers all the time with us. But
Yeah.
a lot of the times when me and Justin are hitting an area, we're looking at the topographical maps and we're going into the areas where there's a lot of mass crop and stuff because it's dropping at that point.
Right.
And the deer at that time are still food to bedding, and they're starting to get into it, but they're not 100% yet, right?
Right.
So they're not traveling a real long distance.
Yeah.
Food, feed, and then lay down. And we tend to, I think, Justin, you'd agree.
I hunt on the ground.
Yeah, we do a lot of that, setting up, hitting a few areas.
Can I stop you real quick? When you guys think of like bedding area for the area that we hunt generally, what are you looking at for bedding area?
Blowdowns, big time blowdowns around here. Swamps,
Okay.
swamp edges, tall. I mean, I've killed a bunch coming out of tall swale grass. They layer it in it. I mean,
Yeah.
And the fur to get out of the weather and stuff like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I mean, it also, everything depends on the weather
Because
that
you
day.
listen to other podcasts or you watch whatever on TV, it's like it's a routine. There's this many pieces of woods. There's this much ag, and it's down to a science at that point. Like
Yeah.
this is where they bed.
We got
I'm-
bedding here.
It can
Nate
be.
and I have done a lot of tag team
Outside that
tracking
house.
together,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean, we've killed a ton of bucks in their beds, and in the hardwoods around here, we catch them a lot in blowdowns.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
So
mean,
the big ridges and stuff, like, so these bigger mature bucks, it's funny, like when you catch those and you start going through these mass crop areas and you'll find big blowdowns of like trees fell down and stuff. We started catching on that these deer are laying down beside them, and we jump them up, we end up shooting them.
Right.
After about the fourth one we shot like that, we started thinking, wait a minute here. Every time we go through one of these big open areas and there's a big blowdown.
Even rocks. We've caught them against big rocks.
Laying behind stone walls. Like, there's a big mature buck taking off.
Big spike.
You know?
Big old brow tine right there.
Yeah. I think that was the one that Tyler got, wasn't it?
It is.
But no, I mean, a lot of times people have a misconception. You got to be in the thickest area there is. It's got to be everything's like you.
Well, I know it's different in New England, or like where up here it's different. It's just not. There's no bedding area.
Those things are those big bucks too. And if you think about it, and you know, I was telling you guys about Lane Benoit and Larry and those guys.
Yeah.
You know, the books tell you one thing, the videos tell you one thing, but when you actually hunt with them, it's a different story. There's a lot of things that are not in those books or those videos that those guys did that you can get on those deer. And some of those big bucks and stuff like that, with those antlers they've got that are really big and wide, they don't go through that thick stuff. They're walking around it. They don't want to be in that any more than you do. So we tend to look for highly placed rubs where they're high up. You know, most people when they're looking at rubs, and you know, we'll just get into rubs real quick because early season and stuff like that. When I look for rubs, I don't care if they're on a 10-inch, 12-inch diameter tree or if they're on a small one. What I look for is the little trees that are all kind of tied in a knot.
Yeah.
I mean, that tells me they've got some antler on them. They've got some tine length on them. And they've got something where they can wrap and break those branches up, and that tells me they've got a rack on their head. I watched a buck, actually videotaped him 3 years ago. He was a 6-point. He had about a 20-inch spread on him, and he rubbed a tree he could just barely get his antlers in.
Wow.
And if you'd seen this deer, you would have said he's a great deer, but you would have never thought the deer that rubbed that tree would have been a little 6-point. And that's what told me is that, you know, big bucks, you know, make big rubs on trees, but not necessarily.
Not the case, right.
So looking for those rubs where they're breaking the tops off and they're just really knotting everything up on these small trees, I get more excited about that than I get excited about those giant rubs.
Yeah. Like when they talk about signposts, have you ever put a camera? Or
I've got several different rubs in New Hampshire and a couple in Maine. They're big. I mean, we're talking. They've been rubbed right down, and one of them looks almost like an hourglass. It's been rubbed on so many times.
Right.
And last year,
tipped over.
I never had one of those, but I'll tell you this: last year I put one on it, and what was amazing to me was not only did I have mature bucks hitting it, I had small bucks hitting it.
Yeah.
So it was telling me that when they rub and they get their scent gland on it, these younger bucks are now learning that, hey, this is a dominance. We got to get in there and do this.
Right.
It's a great way to find out where there's some good deer. Like last year, I set a stand up for mutts, and there was several big community rubs in there, and there was one giant buck, and he was nocturnal a lot. And we never did get a shot at him. Never did see him. But it always seemed like the days that we had him on daytime camera pitches, we weren't there.
Right.
And the days that we weren't, we were seeing smaller bucks. But it's been fun trying to find that. And you get excited every time you see those big rubs and stuff, and it lets you know there's some decent deer in the area. But like I said, those smaller rubs that are all wrapped up and broke off.
Those are the ones that get you most excited.
Those are the ones, because those are the ones in those areas that I found those, and I've hunted them, and I actually harvested some of those deer. They've had tall tines. And some of them weren't super wide. There's been a couple of them that were wide, but they had tall tines on them, and they would get them wrapped up and they'd break them right off.
Right. What do you? So when it comes to bear grounds, and now we're into muzzleloader season, what are you trying to? Are you going to a certain area where you just like?
Yeah, I mean, I run off memory a lot.
But rub lines, like I know they don't. Do they put anything into your head like I've got to go check this rub line out?
I mean, again,
scrapes, I understand.
Again, to me, a rub line is just more about inventory. It lets me know that there's a monster in the area. I don't necessarily hunt a rub line myself. I'm more attracted to scrapes.
Yeah,
but that's just me.
It makes sense. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, if I'm seeing giant rubs, I'm going to be in that general vicinity.
Right. Yeah.
Especially if they're fresh. You know, I'm going to hang a camera. I'm going to do what I can to be in that area as much as I can. I mean,
so mock scrapes.
Mock scrapes.
Yeah. And I'll tell you this, because the best part about New Hampshire is you get to hunt muzzleloader first before rifle season. Right. And
is that going to change?
I don't know if it is. I've heard some rumbling about it. I hope it stays the same, because I really like that. And the reason why I say about the mock scrapes a lot is my wife, she was never really big in hunting, and I finally got her out there to do it. And it's great because I can set her in a stand, and she can overlook the mock scrapes we put out.
Right.
I like that
And
picture. That's a big
last
buck.
year, she ended up harvesting one 209 off the mock scrape.
Jesus.
You know what I'm saying?
I know somebody that
So
found one side.
that to me was
Gives you
just
something
nobody
to
ever
look
saw
for.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
it gives you something, and then she harvested her first one with a crossbow last year
17 or 18,
down in
so
Zone
it's
M.
been a few
Yeah.
And off a
think
mock
17,
scrape,
I
and
think.
it was so cool because she had 3 does come in behind her, and this would never happen to any of us, but they were blowing at her and everything, and then they just walked right out and they went right straight to the scrape. She harvested, she shoots at one. She calls me up and she says, "Hey, I just shot at a doe with a crossbow." She's like, "Can you come over here?" And I'm like, "Did you hit it?" She goes, "I don't know." So I get over there. She harvests that, and both deer were off the same mock scrape.
No shit.
knowing
Yeah,
him.
I'm telling you, the mock scrapes I believe in 100%. Early season, right up
Probably
until just
15
before the
years.
rut. After the rut
He's bought
hits,
a lot
I
of
don't,
guns
I
off
don't, I get that goes out of
Yeah.
the window for me.
Calling and mock sounds like
Yeah.
it's.
I mean, back to the scrape thing. I mean, I shot a massive buck last year because of rubs, so I take that back. But I don't hunt on the rub. It
Right.
just brought me to that area.
You
I
see
saw
it.
that there was. I mean, I found 15 to 20-inch trees that were destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't always mean it's a big buck, but in this case, I could tell it was a monster.
Right.
So I started hanging a camera, and I was getting pictures of him all at night. But
Coming
I know
back
if
to
he's
those
there
rubs?
at night. Well, no, he wasn't coming to the rubs. He was just passing the
passing.
general area.
Okay, just
But
past.
then some scrapes started to show up, and he was just, I could tell he was getting more,
Yeah.
aggressive. But he remained a nighttime deer. But I kept going in there early in the morning, and hunting around those scrapes and the rubs and calling. And I literally, the deer was in a swamp,
First
bedded,
buck he's ever shot.
and I called, and I used my mouth, and I did a snort wheeze with my mouth, just
Yeah.
by myself, as loud as I could, and I literally turned away from the swamp, and I ran back to where I was sitting, and I was breaking trees on my way back to sound like I was pissed off.
Right.
deer.
Yeah.
And I sat down, and I'm like, what did I just do?
buddy.
And as soon as
blown
I
up.
said that, I looked up, and he was charging me.
Thought I was
Yeah.
gonna get him.
So that deer had been there probably every time I'd hunted. He was probably bedded right there. By calling, I got him to come out of that swamp, and he charged me, and I shot it like 5 feet.
No shit.
Yeah.
And it ended up landing right
Yeah.
at a rub.
It was a big buck too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Big,
that
big, heavy buck.
222. That was a big one.
So generally, when you're obviously that happened, but would you
It's my
when
son.
you're calling, do you carry a
My
grunt call?
son's 30.
I use a grunt call. I used to use
That was
the flip
my
cans,
comment.
but
Yeah.
I don't use them anymore.
17.
You don't?
I got
Yeah, I
rid of
do.
that
How come?
because I was calling in way too many small deer.
Okay, that's
Way
what it
too
was.
many
Okay.
small deer. And a lot of people don't know, but if you tip it the wrong way, it actually sounds like a warning, and it will scare away deer. So there's probably times I've used that can, and deer went the other way and never even knew they were there.
Yeah.
Snort
This
wheeze.
year, before I shot that big one, I'd passed like 14, I believe I told you, 14 bucks. A lot of them were on the smaller end, and it was when I used the can. Got rid of the can, got rid of the problem.
And you're
I
just
used a
grunting,
grunt call
yeah.
and a snort wheeze. And the biggest thing I can tell people is
got
don't
shot.
be scared to be aggressive. A lot of people are in the woods going, "Rrr, rrr." I mean, be loud.
They gotta hear it.
Be aggressive.
Yeah.
You gotta hear it.
The most that's going to happen is they're not going to come in.
Right.
But 9 times out of 10, they're coming.
We-
I've killed at least 15 that I can think of.
Off
Good
a grunt.
ones from grunting and calling and rattling.
I was going to ask you about rattling next, but
That snort wheeze though, rattling up here, I've had it work a couple times.
Yeah, I mean, it's not
a
the
lot,
biggest
you know what
choice.
I mean,
Velvet
because
shredding.
your doe to buck ratio is different. It's not like going to Texas. You
Right.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
I've had it work, but I'll be honest with you, all the bucks that I've ever rattled in Maine or even in New Hampshire have been smaller bucks. I've never seen
Just
a
kinda
really,
curious.
a real big buck come in.
Yeah.
Now, I'll be honest with you, during bow season, I will bring the rattle and antlers in, and I'll try tinkling the horns because you never know, right? Yeah, you try it. But snort wheeze, I even have used that in early season and had a giant buck in New Hampshire come in, and I ended up shooting right over the top of my bow. But that snort wheeze can be a powerful call. I was bow hunting in November down on the coast because I already harvested my buck with during rifle tag, so I was expanded hunting. And I was in this swamp, and I see this deer come out on the very end, and I grunted at it. Just kept on going. Didn't even act like anything. So I grunted louder. Nothing. Grunted loud. I mean, I thought I was yelling at this deer with this grunt call, almost sounded like a duck call going off. And he stopped. And I did a snort wheeze with my
That's
mouth,
what I'm
just
saying,
like what
too.
Justin's saying.
You got to do it.
Yeah, did it like that. He turned, he looked, And he just kept on going. And I'm like, well,
Got that one
I
Wednesday.
got his attention.
My son goes
He
out
heard
on
me.
Saturday.
Right.
And
Same
maybe
stand.
we'll see what happens. There was 2 other bucks that came out. So I'm sitting there in the tree and fiddling around, and I'm grunting, just a couple little grunts. And I heard something behind me, and I look, and there he is. It was the same buck I had seen across the swamp. He had keyed in on that area, and he was making a circle around the stand.
Trying to get your wind.
Trying to get me, and I ended up shooting him at 10 yards with my bow, and he was a good buck. He weighed 188. It was a nice
Right
10
across the
point,
street shot it.
and I always remembered that is when I grunted at him the first time, and he didn't stop or look.
Yeah.
Grunt louder, grunt louder, grunt louder,
have 1,000
and
pictures
there was
of that deer.
I'll never forget it. It was
Somebody
like
else shot
growing
it.
up, we used to watch all these hunting shows, right? And one of the guys on one of the shows, and it wasn't Mike Waddell, it was another guy, said, "Hey, listen, if they can't hear you,
Yeah,
do
what's
it
the
louder."
point? Right,
And
yeah.
that always stuck with me because, as we go out in the woods and stuff, I know my hearing isn't as good as it used to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
And,
187.
like my wife's always saying, you got selective hearing, but it's one of those things that when you call, when you call and they react, if they don't come in, at least they heard you. And I'm
Right.
telling you, those mature bucks, even when you think that they didn't hear you and they turn around and look, you've got their attention, they'll turn around. And I don't know how many times
They're
we've
going to
seen
sneak
that.
attack
That
you.
brings me to
sneak in
another
behind
good
you.
point too. I mean, a lot of
3
people, even on the call package, it makes you believe that you don't call until you see the deer.
Yeah,
I am a firm believer in blind calling. That is all I do.
Yeah,
I don't
all the
wait to
time.
see a deer and call.
No, absolutely.
I'm moving through the woods.
Because you wouldn't call all season long.
Right, and we don't live like in Texas in places where you can see a deer. I mean, you could be walking through the woods where we are, and the deer is right there, and you don't even know it.
Right.
So, I mean, my tactic for me personally is to just slowly and methodically move through the woods. I sit for about 30 minutes, 45 minutes where I think there's deer, and I blind call.
Yeah.
If nothing happens within that time frame, I get up and move.
Carry on.
I killed that monster 10 in New Hampshire doing that. I mean, I called 5 different sequences on my way through the woods, had nothing happened. My last time I stopped, the deer was 15 feet from me. Stood right up, turned, jumped over a stone wall, came right at me.
Yeah.
I mean, just like that.
And the funny thing is he had his car with him that day, not his truck.
Yeah.
So he comes strolling in at
A
the
Jetta.
barn, and he's got this giant buck hanging out of his trunk.
Stuffed it in the Jetta. Oh, man, I was having trouble loading that thing. I'd get one end in, and it would fall out. Get the other end in. People are driving by me looking like, what is wrong with this guy?
How
waving.
aggressive is your calling during like opening, archery season?
I don't even really call in the beginning of archery.
Okay.
A couple weeks in, I'll start to call. My theory, and the reason I call so much, is because it's exciting and it starts the hunt all over again. So if you're sitting for an hour or two and nothing's going on, and then you do a call, you get excited
Yeah,
again.
wait
Like,
a
hey,
second,
man, that might have just brought
You're
something
right,
in.
yeah.
So you start hearing something. Could be a
Yeah,
squirrel,
squirrel,
but,
right, but
still
you
gets
still
you
like
going.
going ahead,
Right.
yeah.
So I use that to my advantage to keep me,
Understand.
You'd be
keep me going.
surprised what you call in, too. Coyotes.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I had
We've
that.
killed a lot of
Exactly.
coyotes that
Yeah.
way.
I had that happen to me last year. Like last year, I just strictly hunted with my recurve, and this year I'm just probably gonna be full on hunting with a recurve from now on. But
Nice.
anyway, sitting in the blind and had a spike out in the cut, and I'm like, you know what, I hit the grunt call just to see what happens. See, maybe we'll be curious. Come on in. Sure as shit, about 50 yards to my right, a doe comes in. Just out of curiosity, just kept looking for that deer and just ended up moseying off. I couldn't get a shot at her, but it worked out great just by doing a couple calls, just in the fall.
Yeah, I mean it has advantages all around. I mean, obviously during the rut they'll come in looking, and a real big mature deer like that, the one I got this year. I mean, that deer came in to fight. It had no choice but to come in. I mean, it would not have walked off if for the life of it. I mean, it was coming in no matter what. It charged me, and that's what you're looking for. I mean, you're trying to get that deer a trigger flipped in its head that it has to go check it out.
When you're calling like that, in like the dry leaves, you're obviously walking like a deer, stopping every however long.
Yep.
How long? How long are you like stopping and listening for after you make a call like that?
I sit for 30 or 45 minutes
Every time you do it.
every time I do it because.
So you're not
I mean,
you're not covering a whole lot of ground then. You're just like you're poking and then
I mean,
calling.
in 2 hours I might travel 200 yards.
Yeah.
Not very
Okay,
far.
No shit.
Yeah, I'm not going far at all. I mean, those deer can be a long ways away and hear you. You got to give them time, to get to you.
Right.
But I say, after 45 minutes, if they haven't gotten to me, then I'm going to get up and move. But that's the other thing, in my opinion, is trying to creep and be too quiet is worse than walking normal.
Still alive.
Right.
Yeah. I
When
agree.
a deer hears
it's
something
alarming, right?
creeping,
So far.
they're automatically assuming it's a predator. When you're just walking through the woods, they think it's another deer. I mean, I've been calling before, got up to go to my next spot, and just was walking and had a buck walk right to me.
Right.
We met each other, and he met the ground.
Yeah.
Have you guys ever tried, so this is something I've tried early season, so you're hunting the oaks and stuff. You ever taken small stones and put them in your pocket? You're sitting in there and throwing a stone out every now and then, so it sounds like acorns falling out of the tree?
Yeah.
So that's the other misconception. So when people find mass crops and food sources, they think, well, I got acorns, I'm going to have deer. Yeah, you might have deer, but the thing is, deer have certain acorn mass crops that they eat first before they go to anything else. Right? You hear about white oak acorns versus the red oak acorns. We've got areas that we hunt that we know certain trees, early season, they're going to be at those trees. And you'll have acorns dropping everywhere. But they'll go to those certain trees. It's those ones.
That's what I've always, it blows my mind. Like, oh, I hit the acorns. I'm like,
What
the
ones?
fucking acorns, they're all over the place.
And that's the thing. And especially when we have these big mass crops, it's like, shit, what do we do? I mean, they're everywhere. They can be anywhere.
Right.
The key at that point is just finding where they want to eat, what area in that mass crop that they're feeding on first.
Yeah.
That's the key. When you find that and then you find the does.
It's not necessarily the closest tree that's
Nope.
dropping next to the bedding. It could
Nope.
be
They can go wherever. And sometimes what we found
Aged trees.
it all depends. Like
Big old oaks,
we've got some
yeah.
trees, some big oaks down on the ocean that are right now. I mean, literally next to the ocean. And I don't know whether it's due to the salt, if it does something to the acorn, but they will be at those trees. We'll sit around them and we'll see 15, 20 deer in one night. And
geez.
there won't
Every
be any
night.
deer
Yeah,
near any of the acorns as they're coming through, and they'll be right there on those trees.
Right.
Whether we get a shot or not,
There's a reason.
but
It's
it's
got to be that sea breeze, like the sodium coming off that ocean. The same
Well-
thing with like Moose Alley.
Oh, they walk right down the beach.
yeah, we've seen them eating
monsters.
the
Remember the two
seaweed and
fighting
stuff.
last year?
Yeah, down on the beach.
I mean, they were fighting right on the beach.
yeah.
Broad
Where-
daylight.
on
It was
the
like
coast.
11 o'clock in the
Yeah, no
afternoon.
You guys are gonna love this. So my buddy Tibbs is in a tree and we're talking. He's like, dude, I just shot a doe. I'm like, well, where's it going? He goes, you ain't gonna believe this. I gotta go swimming. I go, you gotta go swimming. He goes, it's in the
Yeah.
York River. He had to go out
Holy
there and
smokes.
swim to go get it. Right down on the ocean. It was going right down along the edge of the ocean.
Hopefully the Great
He
Whites are
housed in,
gone.
off he goes.
I didn't like it at all.
That was
to be
funny,
honest
though.
with you. But I wasn't. I mean, I watched it float up, and I'm just like
You gotta be kidding me.
staring at it, like I got to do this. I took everything off, dove in, grabbed one leg,
was
and
funny.
I swam back with it.
Yep.
Same
Like,
thing
that's
happened to you, but we didn't get to jump in on that one.
No
though.
video.
No video.
No, I was too busy laughing. I'm like, you got to be kidding. I'm like, where is it again? I'm like, I'll be right there. We'll get out there. Funny. But no, we had the same thing happen. I ended up shooting a nice buck, and we jumped him up, and I kind of hit him a little bit back. And it was the year that I had my moose tag, so I was trying to get my Grand Slam.
Yeah.
And I was just fortunate enough that we were going in to actually set a mock scrape. And down in an expanded area, if you're walking around without a bow during that time of year, it's crazy. So we were in regular clothes. We didn't have no camo on, no nothing. We had our bows. We just walk in, and I look across this ridge, and here's this buck coming across the ridge. And he was out there at about 45. Stopped him, took the shot, dinged him. He took off. We said, all right, we're going to go back. We went back to Justin's. We hung out. We, said, all right, we'll give him 35, 40 minutes. We went back in. Well, I hit him a little bit back, and he had laid down right down by the river. And we literally, actually, Justin saw him. He's like, there he is. He's on the rocks.
Standing
And
there, yeah.
I was like, all right, I'm going to try to get in the shot. And just about when I drew the bow back to take the shot, he jumps in the river. And he swims across the entire river. And we're both sitting there going, you got to be kidding me. Where's he going to go, We're thinking he's going to die out in the middle of it. And we're like, man, now we got to go out there and get this thing.
Right.
And he didn't. He made it to the other side. And he crawled up the bank in. And we said, you know what? Tomorrow morning, we'll go in and get him. We'll just give him overnight. And we went over there, and there was a big gate and the fence, and I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I'm like, what is this all about?
The mansion.
Yeah, and so we go out, and I'm like, all right, we got to go ask permission, right? So
Yeah.
how are we going to do this? We get up there, and this guy comes out in his underwear, and he's like, what do you guys want to do? And I'm like, I harvested a deer, and you'll hear me say harvest a lot because when you're talking to people out there, if you say kill, that like brings something out in somebody.
Right. Yeah.
So it's always, we harvested a deer last night and it came on your property. Can we go look? Guy was cool as cool. He's like, yeah, man, go for it. He goes, I rent this place off a dude. I don't care what you do. And I'm like, man, can we bow
wanna
hunt
put a
here?
stand?
And he's like, I don't care what you do. As long as you don't shoot the dogs, we're good. So we went out there and in about 20 minutes we found the deer, which was
Awesome.
pretty cool. But
Good deal. Getting into some tracking. This is one of my favorite. I don't even know how to explain it. Like, once I started tracking or went on a deer track, and it kind of came together, and I saw a deer, I was
nothing
like,
it.
what have I been doing this whole time?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how come I just don't wait until there's snow on the ground? And obviously, because, like you said, you're filling time until it's deer season.
Yeah.
So, but the biggest issue I've had, I guess, is bumping deer when you come up to a bed and there's running tracks coming out of it.
Mm-hmm.
At what point do you stop and try to do something different?
So before you even get to that point, so
Yeah.
let's start right at the beginning.
Do you want to start at the beginning?
Let's start
Yeah,
right
that'd
at
be
the
great.
beginning.
Yeah.
So I learned a lot through my grandfather hunting. I grew up with my grandparents, and he was big in this. You know, when back in their day, they shot deer to eat.
Yeah.
And so he taught me the fine arts of it. You know, I'm doing it. I was successful a little bit, and then I was really good friends with Larry and Lane Benoit. And Lane Benoit spent a lot of time.
Which is
down the
crazy.
house.
You say that and you just like you blow past it, but to read the books, to know like just the background and the history of those boys.
I'll tell you,
Man,
those
we
guys.
had some fun.
We had a lot of fun with it.
It's fucking crazy.
And the key with those guys is,
It
everybody thinks like they're bragging and stuff. They didn't. They were the most
humble.
Larry was the most humble guy you ever met in your life. And I'll never forget it. He sat with my son. My son was little at the time, and he hands my son his rifle. And he's like, you know what? He goes, you're gonna hunt with me. And he made him call him Grampy. They were out shooting. They were out shooting frogs together with a BB gun up to his house there. And I videotaped him making his knives and stuff. And it was just so cool. He made a knife for my son for his birthday, and they came down to the house. It was really cool. They stayed with us, and they're real people, and they love deer hunting.
Yeah.
Let me tell you. And Larry, I swear, he was part whitetail. I mean, everything that he did was about being in the woods and seeing whitetails and harvesting whitetails, and it was just everything that led up to it. And I really was pretty taken away with it. And Lane, so we started hunting together, and Tibbs and us, we'd done some hunts together and stuff. And the thing with Lane is, you hear about they drive around all day long, they look for a track. That's not necessarily true. A lot of the times they walk ridges, just like if you're looking for a bear with bear dogs. They'll walk ridges looking for tracks. You know that up on that ridge is a good mass crop. They'll go in there and look for a track, and they may find their big track, or they may find a track going into that one. So those are some of the things that I learned. And the key is, I'll never forget it. This is a short story. We're in New Hampshire last day. This was a few years back. It was almost the end of the day, and I'd seen some tracks. Lane calls me up and he says, hey, what are you doing? I said, I'm on Freedom. I'm looking at some tracks. It's 11 o'clock. He's like, I'm on my way. He goes, keep doing what you're doing, find some tracks. I'll get with you about probably 1 o'clock. We'll go track down a big buck and kill it. That's how confident he was that we would do it. So when he showed up, I had like 6 different tracks. And so I brought him around. He's like, nah. And I'm like, why not? And the key was with him, when I hunted with him, he'd ask me questions. So I'd be like asking him all kinds of questions. He would stop me. He's like, okay, we're going to go on this track. And it was kind of snowed in, big track. And he's like, I go, why are we going on that one? He's like, no, look at your track. What's it doing? It's older, right? And I said, yeah. He says, you see the ridges and stuff? He goes, yeah, he's going to go up and lay down. He goes, that's why. He goes, you see the deer crossing back and forth? This track ain't with him. So that means he's laying down up on that ridge, or he's on that side ridge somewhere. He just hasn't crossed. He's like, so we're going to go on that one. All right, so we get in there. Before we did anything, he made me look at that track. He says, look at each one of his tracks. Then I'm looking at him. I go, what am I looking for? He goes, what's different? He goes, every deer has something different about their track. How they step. Is it deeper on one of them? Is it wider space? He goes, if you have to, measure it. Take a picture of it. Do whatever you got to do. He goes, memorize that track. And I said, why? He goes, you're going to learn. Memorize that track. So we did. We go in there, and we're standing there, and the deer jumped up. There was a doe that jumped up, and I didn't see it. And he's like, hey. He goes, stop right here. Stop right here. And I said, okay. I go, what happened? He goes, we just jumped that buck, I bet. And we go over there. There's his bed. He's off and running. But he wasn't running. He was walking, and the doe would run. He goes, okay, I'm going to ask you a question. What do you want to do? Do we go right after it, or do we stand here and wait? And I said, let's get right after it. I'm all excited. I got Lane with me, right? I got Lane. I want to kill this deer in the worst way.
We're running.
We're going, right? And he's like, he stopped me right in my tracks. He said, you made your first mistake of the day. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, don't go anywhere. He goes, that buck doesn't know why that doe ran. He may think it's another buck. We're going to stand right here. We're going to give it 15 minutes, and we're going to wait. If we don't see nothing in 15 minutes, we're going to continue on. And we're sitting there, and we're just shooting the shit, and he's talking about his son Zeb in wrestling. And I'll never forget it. I was looking over his shoulder, and I look. All I see is antlers coming back. And I look at him. I go, Lane, big buck coming right at us. He's like, where? I go, right behind you. He moves off to the side. The deer comes out. I wanted to shoot this deer with him, and so bad that I took the shot, and I was trying to shoot him in the neck. and I should have waited for him to step all the way out. But you get that memory, you're with your,
You're with
a guy that, you're with a guy that
is in all the magazines.
You just want to do it with him, and you want to have that picture where you shoot a big buck with him, and I took a shot that I probably should have waited, and I hit him, and before we went in, I used to use a semi-automatic carbine .6, and I'll never forget this. I get out of the truck.
What do you think of that, Mutzy?
Yeah.
In the day, they were good. They're a little bit outdated now.
Yeah.
They freeze a lot.
They freeze,
for Christ's sake.
I had killed a bunch. I had killed a bunch of big bucks with this gun. Never had a jam in my life. And the second lane sees it. He goes, "Oh, you carry a Jam-O-Matic, do you?"
No, he knew
I'm like,
right off the
what are you
bat.
talking about? I'm like, this gun's killed all kinds of. I'm not gonna get a jam. And he's like, "Yeah, okay." He goes, "We use pumps for a reason. They don't jam."
Right, so
Jam-O-Matic is what he calls
snow
it.
gets packed in.
Oh, yeah,
and
I'm
it
like,
freezes up.
You
The
got
wool gloves, like I noticed for me carrying it, I carry it almost on the chamber, and it frost all up around the chamber. And one time I couldn't get it was so frozen. I'm like, couldn't get the chamber. Yeah. I'm like, holy smokes!
Yeah, it was awesome.
Hopefully this thing, goes off.
I shoot at this deer. The deer goes down. I'm on cloud 9. The deer gets back up. I go to shoot again. My gun's jammed. Now, this gun had never jammed till this point. I still blame Blaine for it. But I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So Lane gets down on one knee. He fires 2 shots at it, and he doesn't get it, and it takes off. So we get going. It hits posted property. Now, regardless what you've ever heard about the Benoits and how they do all this stuff illegal and all that, I'm going to tell you a story that if I hadn't been there, I might have been one of those people. But I'll tell you this. We were with him. We hit those posted signs. He says, we can't go any further. I'm like, yeah, but my buck went that way. He goes, Nate, it's not worth it. He goes, let's go down. Let's find a landowner. Even if it takes us to the rest of the day, let's do the right thing. And we did. We went down. We crawled all the way down the mountain, went down the road, found a driveway, walked all the way back up in, asked the people, hey, listen, we shot at a deer. It went on your property. Can we do it? They was cool as cool. They're like, yep, go right ahead. Maybe took us 30 minutes, 35 minutes out of our time.
This
but
is
it was
pre-cell phone.
Yeah, this is
Onyx.
pre-everything.
Yeah.
And off we go.
Right.
So
So
we
it's
get
not
on
just like, okay, let's just see what's up
Yeah,
ahead.
no,
You
there
couldn't,
was none of
know.
that.
We just figured maybe the next driveway, that's what it would be. And
Yeah.
we went in, and luckily the people were there and they let us go. So now the dilemma is we get up in behind their house, and we're about probably 300 yards on this oak ridge, and there is deer tracks everywhere. And the deer has stopped bleeding. Right. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I'm like, what do I do now? And Lane was,
I hate that.
Lane was as cool as a cucumber. He was like, okay, find your buck. And I'm like, are you shitting me? I'm like, you look at all the tracks. And he's like, what did I tell you about your track?
Oh, yeah.
He brought me right back to lesson 1. Mm-hmm. Study your track. So I get in there and I'm looking around and he says, do circles, do bigger circles, do a bigger circle. He goes, that buck, if you're not seeing him, he had to walk out of here somewhere. And I was on my 3rd circle and I'm looking at this track and I'm looking at it and I said, Lane, I think that's my track right there. And he looked at me and says, that is your track. He knew it all along. And we started following. We got about 40 yards and there was a bed full of blood. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And we kept on that deer.
How long did you circle those tracks for?
I circled that track probably 30 minutes before
30
I found
minutes.
it. 30 minutes.
I gave up probably after
30
10. It would
minutes.
have been like it's gone.
But he was determined. He's like, you got to find that track. And we did. And what ended up happening is I dinged him through the brisket. We ended up seeing the deer just before dark. Didn't get another shot at it. And we never ended up getting him. But I'll never forget that story. And we went out looking around and trying to get it. It's just like following, like he says, you got to find the right track. And Larry was big on that. So we were up in Dover Foxcroft, and we're up there, and we're going around these cuts and stuff, and we're looking for tracks, and you're seeing some big tracks up there. And I'm like, oh, I want to jump on this one. And he's looking at me. He's like, listen, he goes, you got to look at what the track is doing. So they would go in the woods about maybe 100 yards on the track. Depending on how that deer walked and what he did was whether or not they were even going to go on that deer. So if a deer is chasing a doe or looking for a doe,
He wouldn't take it
because that deer's going to go. He's he's just gone.
Straight lining, right.
If you had the deer, the big buck that was with a doe, that was a pretty good one. And the other thing was antler size, right? And Larry's thing was, if you're going to shoot a big buck, have some decent antlers because you can put them on the wall. Why not have the whole package? And his house proved it, man. There was deer antlers everywhere. But you'd get in there, and we were walking on these trails, and we were seeing where these bucks had gone around trees instead of through trees, and they got excited. And to see Lane get excited or Larry get excited, these guys had killed some big deer, and you knew that like whatever they had seen in their lifetime, and they're seeing it right now. This is what you wanted to look for. And so I was taking pictures. I mean, I was literally taking pictures and trying to write notes. Doing everything I can, you know what I mean? And it ended up being really cool.
How old were you when you met them?
I was 27.
No, you were prime
Yeah,
time.
I was ready, man. I was often going. And, and it was really cool. Me and Justin, we got to spend a lot of time with them. down when they hunted down. Matter of fact, we hunted down actually in this area up in here where you guys are.
You wouldn't even have thought that he was any different than any of us.
No.
I mean, a bunch of moose hunts with us, cruising on the truck. God make you laugh. I mean,
Right.
just like cruising with him and I, you know.
I think that's pretty.
But
cool
he did always. I mean, he was full of knowledge. I mean, he taught
everybody.
taught
Well,
us a
think of
lot
the people.
stuff.
Like, so that right there is my first buck I ever shot in my bed.
Awesome.
Monster.
Hey,
No,
you know
not
what?
a monster.
No,
But
it's a monster.
it was literally like you read the book and you try to apply what you learn, and you fuck up a lot, but when it all comes together, you're like, wow, like,
It worked.
Yeah, it works. And to have someone go out there and walk ridges and run ridges and write it all down in a book, and I can read it, and then it actually works. It blows my mind.
To have the privilege to be able to do it with him in person.
Yeah.
It's
is-
crazy.
is-
Yeah. Well,
it's pretty
I guess
phenomenal.
that's where I was going with that. Is it seems like a fairy tale, or it seems like, I guess, the rest of the country probably would be like, yeah, we don't give two shits. But if you're like in New England, Vermont, Mass,
You're a hunter.
Vermont, Mass, Maine, New Hampshire. It's that's a family that is like
Absolutely.
absolutely known for killing giants.
I have always said that if you can hunt in New England and harvest deer, you can hunt anywhere in the country. And I'll tell you, I've hunted Iowa. I've had the privilege, through my years, I've been able to go to a few different places and try to apply that knowledge. And I'm telling you, I mean, I've been very fortunate to harvest some really good deer outside of the States, but it's the same knowledge that I apply hunting in New England out there. Mm-hmm. And I find it's, as long as you can get the property to hunt on, I'm going to tell you right now, you're going to shoot probably one of the biggest bucks that are in those woods in the time frame you've got, because of the applied knowledge that we have to use up here in New England. You hunt 100 times harder to shoot a 4-pointer up here than you do anywhere else in the country. And I'm telling you that right now. I laugh because, when we did the TV shows and stuff like that, and we would go out to these other places, and we'd come into camp and, we'd shoot a decent buck. It'd be 125 inch, 130 inch. To me, that's a giant deer. And you'd have people in the camp saying, wow, it wasn't, I passed up a 150 or a 170 today. And I'm like, why would you pass up that deer? But it's because of how they were brought up hunting and what they are very selective to harvest, right? So if I lived in Iowa, I probably wouldn't shoot a 150-inch deer every year. Right. I would wait for the 160s, the 170s, because guess what? If I have all their season to hunt and I've got properties to hunt, you're probably going to see that out there.
And the rut's going to be wild.
You have to be dedicated to hunt in New England.
Yeah.
By
exactly.
Yeah. Takes a lot more effort, more scouting, more everything.
Everything.
But the big thing about tracking, and I tell everybody this, is if you mess up on a track one day, you keep on going. So your original question was they get out of their bed and they run off, right?
Yeah.
So it's simple. You just sit there and wait. And honestly, then this would be something that I learned through Lane was sit there for 20 minutes, let them calm down, and then get back on them again. The key to it, though, is you got to be looking in the woods. A lot of people, they're mistaken. I was doing this a lot, as I would bump into hair, is what Larry would call it. They take off. So, because your eyes, you're so focused on, there's the track. Yeah. You're not focused on anything around you. So, all of a sudden, you look up, and there he is, and he takes off.
I catch myself thinking about, like,
he's up around that corner.
Well, no, just the move. Like, all right, like it's a track. If a doe comes in with it or whatever happens, and then I'm so worried about like the feeding aspect of it. Of like, okay, he's gonna go lay down after he feeds. My eyes are pointed at the ground more than
you're looking for the
they're
feeding.
pointed up. I don't want to miss the feeding because I'm gonna blow them out anyways.
But see, that's another myth they have is like every time they feed, they don't necessarily lay down.
Not even.
So
close.
And I laugh.
They could be just
We did that. So with Lane, we're out there hunting, and we see where he feeds. So me and Justin are like, dude, we're going to kill this deer now. He's going to be laying down like 30 yards from here is what we're thinking. And Lane's just laughing at us like, yeah, okay, guys. He's not even going to be here because guess what? Just because he fed does not mean that he's going to lay down. Now, if they feed 2, 3, 4 times, and they start zigzagging a lot, and they're going up to a blow down, or they're going up this blow down, all right,
which isn't necessarily true either. Remember that buck last year? We went down to Mass. We go down to Mass and track a lot, him and I. And we tracked a buck for 4, maybe 5 miles. And the deer did that like every 10 minutes. It'd eat, it would zigzag, and me and him were like, all right, we're getting ready.
Here it goes.
Nothing.
I honestly thought we were going to kill him.
Yeah. We finally got to the end. This deer had a big hoof on it. It ended up being smaller, but we did a little loop, and we caught that deer off guard, and it was from here to that wood right there away,
No
five
shit,
feet
really?
from us.
Oh, he's just laying
and
there.
it was just laying there looking the other
Hunkered
way.
down.
Okay,
If
what
had it
made-
been the deer we wanted, it
would
would
dead.
it was
What,
game over.
what made you all of a sudden be like, all right, let's loop around this deer? What?
Because we could tell this time the way he
jumping
was zigzagging, it was a lot more aggressive, and you could tell he was seeking out a place to lay. And then we saw a couple spots where he laid down, but he wasn't comfortable. When you start seeing that,
Okay.
he's gonna finally find a place, and he's gonna be there.
So now, like you said, you saw where he kind of, just like a dog, kind of.
Yeah, he pawed around a little bit.
Yep. So when did you all of a sudden be like, all right, we need to loop around this deer?
because we looked at the terrain and we came to a conclusion together
Okay.
that out of the area we're looking at, he's probably going to be laying over
thicker
there.
area,
And judging by the way the wind was,
And we
he's
just
the
went.
guy in the wind.
So a lot of times, like we were saying,
The
if you
wind,
jump
yes.
that deer two or three times,
Wind
so
with
that's
me,
the problem right there. When you
everything.
jump him 2 or 3 times, he knows you're on him at that point.
Yeah.
So
like
the
that,
key is once
Franconia.
if you do that 2 or 3 times and you're not catching him, make a big circle around him. Try to get in front of him. I did that over here last year in Freedom, the last day of New Hampshire last year. So he calls me up. He hits a big buck literally down the street. And he's looking for his deer. And I'm up on a mountaintop, which was the only place I had cell service, last day in New Hampshire. And I text my wife. I said, I just found the track I was looking for. And I literally had been all day looking for a track. I had gone in the woods. I'd gone up on the ridges. I just could not find the right track that I felt I could harvest it.
Right.
And I finally, it was snowed in. I got it. It's going up top. I'm like, I got this deer. I'm like, I was so excited. And it brought me back to the training that I had with when I was out with everybody doing this with Lane and stuff. And I just excited. I'm like, I'm going to kill this deer. And I actually texted my wife. I said, this deer is going to have a hard time keeping his life today. I'm going to get him. I'm going to get him. And I got on there and I start going up. And I knew my bud, he's got one that he's chasing right now. And I'm waiting for him to send me a text with a big bone master that he's killed. And,
Right.
so I'm all excited that way. And I get up in there and I literally, the snow was pretty thick up on the top of the hill, and the way he was going, there was a big ridge down on the bottom, and I'm like, he's going to go down that ridge, feed a little bit, and then come back up on the top. So I had already predetermined what I thought he was going to do, and as he started doing it, I had jumped the deer. What I didn't know was that he made a button hook on me, came up, went about maybe 75 yards, and laid down behind me. He just made a loop right up around me. And there was a big steep ridge there, and the deer trail looked like it was going around that ridge, which I would have thought he was doing. And I started going, and I stopped, and I'm like, you know what? I should make a button hook up and around the top of this ridge, this ledge, and look down into that hardwoods, because I bet I'll catch him right there. And I didn't do it. I'm like, nope, I got to go forward, and I made my mistake, because when I did that, I turned around and looked, and there he was taking off. And I'm like, damn. I'm like, I knew he was right there.
Gonna get you every
And
time.
There he goes. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So now I'm like, all right, I messed up. Where's he going to head? So I just sat there for 15 minutes and I waited. And I said, you know what? I started going. I jumped him again. And I didn't see him, but I could see where he was running. I'm like, all right, he knows I'm behind him now. So what I did, I was on the side hill. I turned. I did a hard 90 degrees. I went up around that hill. I made probably 300 yards, came back in, came down that edge of that side hill that he was running on. I'll never forget it. I'm standing there looking, and here comes that deer. He's walking up the side hill, and he turns around, and he's looking at his backtrack.
Right.
And I'm like,
Because he thinks you're behind him.
you think so?
Yeah.
I'd
Right.
say,
You jump those big ones a couple of times, they're
Yeah.
going to focus on the back trail. They're gonna
Oh,
say,
yeah.
what's following me?
I
And if you can get enough distance around and cut them off,
thought he was dead.
play in the wind accordingly.
I thought he was done. I've never been so confident in shooting a deer in all my life. Much had set me up with my 35 well and pump carbine.
That's
I'm
right.
ready to rock and roll. You know what I mean? I'm like, this deer's in the truck. I've got him in the truck already. So I braced against a tree. He's coming, and I'm like, you have
Can't
no
ask for
idea.
anything
You're
better,
done.
yeah.
He turns, and he's literally turning, quartering to me a little bit, but enough where I know I'm going to hit him in the shoulder. He's done. I put it right on him. I fire. The deer takes off. I call my wife. I said, hey, I just shot a giant. I'm going to be home a little bit late. I said, she goes, well, send me a picture of him. I said, well, I haven't found him yet. I said, but I just shot him.
But he's fucking
And-
smoked.
And she's like, I'm like, there's no question in my mind. He's smoked. She's like, oh, that's awesome, hon. Do you want me to come up? And I'm like, you ain't going to find me. But I'm like, I'll get him out to the truck. And I said, when I do, you meet me down the tagging station, because she loves coming down there and seeing him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I get down there. There's hair all over the snow and not an ounce of blood. And I'm like, you got to be shitting me. There's no way this just happened. I start
I'm
tracking
laughing
it.
at him.
Yeah, I know, because I'm texting him. And I'm like, dude, you ain't going to believe what happened. And he's like,
does it feel?
he's like, dude, I can't find no blood either. And I'm like, what do you got? He goes, I got hair all over the snow. I'm like, don't even tell me that. I'm like, send me the picture you did. And he's
We
like,
both did it.
did it in the same day. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I tracked that deer. He crossed in front of my truck just before dark and ended up in this other clear cut. And that was the last day of New Hampshire season, and he's still out there. And it's one of those spots that I go to every year, late season, and there is always going to be a giant buck in that area.
Right.
And I just get excited. When there's snow, I head for it because it's either around here or over there.
The thing around here too, a lot of people focus on finding a giant buck track, but we don't have the miles of road in southern Maine to just cruise. So I'm always, if I find a buck, I get on it no matter what, because that deer will bring you to the other deer.
Oh yeah,
Right.
I can't tell you how many big deer I've either killed or attempted to kill that I started off chasing a small one first.
Right.
That big 10 I got in Freedom with him, we started on, it was probably a 4-pointer. I mean,
it was small,
something small, and we stayed on it, and within 100 yards, boom, there was a monster, and it just walked by. I mean, that deer took me. Without following that deer, I'd have never known the big one was there.
but we were double teaming that, and that was the key to that. Is I led on the trail, and Justin was the eyes. He was watching, scanning the woods, and it was raining,
Pouring.
sleeting. It was horrible out. We had my
Which
son
was good.
with us, which was cool.
in our
'cause
benefit.
The windier, the stormier, the better it is for tracking. And I'll be honest with you, when it's bright, sunny days and no wind, I just go, ugh. I mean, it's great, but I'm like, you got
It
kidding
happens,
me.
but
But I love it when it's windy out, real windy out, or it's storming out. I'm going to tell you right now, those deer are not going to go far, and they're going to lay down, and you're going to shoot them. But that
a lot
day,
more movement in the woods also.
It's
just
awesome.
with-
Oh, yeah.
whatever, you know.
and they
wind and-
hold up. They don't want to go unless you're right on top of them. And that
because
particular
their
day,
defenses aren't 100%.
no,
Yeah.
They're hearing,
Yep.
the wind's blowing in
Scent.
different directions.
Just swirling.
that
Yeah.
particular day,
even with a heavy snow, it blinds those deer. I mean, I walked up right down the street. I killed a big boy down here with.
Whoa,
I mean,
whoa,
it
whoa,
was
whoa.
it was snowing. It was snowing like crazy.
Yeah.
And I was able to get within like 30 yards of that deer. Had his nose right down. Had no idea I was even
No, it's there.
No idea.
Yeah.
that particular
No
day,
idea.
No idea.
No idea. That particular day, though, what was cool about it is the double teaming thing. It can be hard because the guy in the front, your natural reaction after you've done tracking a while, your natural reaction isn't to look at the track. You're scanning, right? But you got to force yourself to look at that track because the guy behind you is following you. He's not looking at the track, and that's what we did that day. And we got down in there, and Justin, we hadn't gone in there maybe a couple hundred yards, and there was this big ridge we were starting to go up, and we had hit another buck track, and then there was another buck track. So we had 3 different buck tracks in that one area. And I'll never forget it. I turn around, look, and there was Justin picking his gun up, and I look over, and there's the buck standing there looking at us, and he shoots him and drops
After
him in his
that, there was
tracks.
only 2 buck
Bucks in
tracks.
that. And then we had to drag him all the way up the hill, which was something.
yeah.
But we did the same thing. We used that same concept later on that day, and ended up harvesting. My son ended up harvesting. a nice
That
3-point
was a
buck,
three
which
buck day.
was awesome. And then we ended up harvesting.
that was the
another
picture,
8-point.
yeah.
We ended up harvesting a nice 8-point. I got a nice 8-point later on that afternoon, and that one was the same thing. Me and Justin had seen some buck tracks going up and down this one hill, and they were older tracks, but it was the same buck going back and forth. You could tell by his track. And so they dropped me off. They were getting the deer out of the woods, and I said, I'm going to go up on that ridge and see if I can't find him. He's been up and down there quite a bit, so maybe I'll catch him up there coming back. And I was going down along the side of the hill, and I hit his track. It was fresh, and I'm like, wow, that's a pretty fresh track. So I started following him. He made a button hook, and I said, you know what, I'm going to cut up around that hill and come down the other side. And when I did, he was coming up the other side, and I ended up shooting him. And that was a really cool hunt. That one, the one down over here though, the big 11-point. That one, yeah, that was a good deal. But one of those things that he had done a few things that I had never seen a buck do before. He'd walk down a river, so I was on this deer pretty hard, and I knew I was pushing him pretty hard. And I lost his tracks, and I thought he crossed the brook. And I'm like, where the hell did he go? There's no tracks. He must have circled 10 minutes looking for his tracks. And then I came to the realization he must have walked down the brook. And I get down. I bet that deer walked 75 yards down the brook and before he
jumped
came
back
out.
up.
And I had never had a deer do that before. And luckily, later on that afternoon, I was able to harvest that deer. The only other time I had that
Caught
happen,
right up to him.
the only other time I'd ever, well, it was fun. He crossed the main road on
I
me.
tied him
so-
up to a tree.
Yeah.
That's right. Just, hey,
I got him right
he's
here
up
for you.
And following the water drops.
Yeah.
it was pretty insane. But the one up in north, up in Rangeley, had the same thing happen. He stayed in that river for a while before he came out. And I'll never forget it. We were tracking him across this ridge, and there was a guy up in there with a fellow buncher knocking trees down, and we start hearing gunshots. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. This guy must be shooting at the deer. He's shooting out of the machine. And I'm like, we get up there, and this guy's loading his gun up. And I'm like, what happened? He goes, you ain't gonna believe the buck that came out here. I was cutting trees down. He goes, I swung the fellow buncher, and I got that gun. I just started shooting. I'm out of ammo. You got any bullets? And I'm like, what the hell? I'm like, where'd he go? Anyway,
308 or on 6.
He went that way. And I'm like, what the hell? And the guy never hit the deer, and we never did catch up to that deer. And that deer right there, me and my cousin were on him, and it was funny. We were driving down a tote road, and the deer comes out and steps in the tote road. And, anybody's first, a big drop tine on him. I mean, this thing was massive. His antlers looked like they were orange, like this bright orange on him. Never forget it. And my cousin's like, I'm getting out of the truck and shooting him. I'm like, what are you, really? I'm like, dude, we can hunt him like the Benoits. And he's like, no, I'm going to shoot him. Is what I'm going to do. We're going to shoot him.
This one has a drop time, so.
Wait.
And I had to laugh because by the time we get done talking, the deer takes off. Yeah. And I'm like, we'll catch him, no problem. We spent all day tracking this thing. And then that happened. We get out to the main road. We are so dead. We're laying on the side of the road. This lady stops, and she's like, I just wanted to make sure you guys weren't hurt. You were laying there. And I'm like, is there any way you can give us a ride back to my truck? She's like, well, I can give you a ride, but you got to do something. And I'm thinking, hey, that's what I got my cousin here for. I'm like, hey.
It's okay, old gal. I'll get it done.
I'm ready to take one for the team there, bud. So all of a sudden, we were down by the Richardson Lakes. I'll never forget it. And she says, hey, I need my docks pulled out. So after tracking this deer all day, we get down, we pulled her docks out, and she gave us a ride. Pulled her docks out.
Is that what they call it?
Pulling the docks out.
Pulled the docks out.
We switched one of those, a couple letters there.
But that was an interesting time. We got out of there and got back to the truck. But tracking is just, there's nothing like it. It's the best feeling in the world.
Remember that one?
Remember
that one in Tamsworth that we tracked together? The one you shot, the one that rolled down the hill.
Oh yeah, we're on a steep bank.
That deer, it's unbelievable how smart they are. I mean, this deer was reversing in its own tracks, and then it would walk that way. So we're going along, and the deer was going that way.
Right.
And it kept doing that. And at one point, it did that. It backed up a long ways, and then it, scooted off, and it was laying on a ridge. And I was walking in front of Nate this time. He was behind me, and he happened to see its antler. The thing was laying, overlooking, it
was steep.
A huge bowl. And it happened to catch us out of the corner of the eye, and it just stood up before it had a chance to take off. He let one rip, and when we got up, the deer was like 400 yards down into this bowl.
Shit.
And it tumbled all the way down. We had to grab it, go all the way back up, and then all the way back down. But it just brings me to a point, though, that those deer, you gotta having another person with you when you're tracking is very useful when a deer is doing stuff like that.
Yeah, because a lot of people will also say that it's a lot harder. Too.
Can be.
Yeah,
you got to have two guys that are on the same page.
Know what they're doing and are on the same page. Like, we don't talk at all. It's just mental.
A little bit of sign language, hand signals, and just keep going.
Same thing when we turkey hunt.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't talk when we're turkey hunting. We know what to do. He knows what I'm going to
It brings me to an awesome story of this year in Massachusetts. So the awesome part about Massachusetts hunting, if you guys have never done this, is it's their season for gun is after all of our seasons.
Yeah.
So you've got muzzleloader, actually you've got shotgun 2 weeks, and then you've got muzzleloader right till December 31st. So, and they've got snow. And we get in the buggy and we head, right? And we've never hunted Massachusetts. And Northeast Big Buck Club, they get magazines and stuff. We read a lot of that stuff, and we've actually submitted some articles and stuff to it, which is really cool. But there's a lot of information in there that people have wrote in about areas that they hunt, right? And, places what they look for. And so we started keying on this. We said, hey, let's go do that. It's after the season.
Nothing else to do.
We go do it, you know what I mean? So we headed.
My boss gave me the week
and
off.
Last year, I had to laugh. Last year we were out there.
Inside joke.
We were tracking this big buck, and he had gone all over the place. And he had crossed this road, and this lady was in the road, and she was smoking the tires right off her truck. She was stuck, like her back brakes locked up?
No, the old goat farmer.
The goat farmer. That's funny. So I'm a little hard of hearing. So Justin's over there, and he calls her Lucy or something. So I think that's her name. So I'm calling her Lucy, and she's looking at me like, what the hell are you talking about? And so she has this dog in her front seat. And sitting there, and I thought she said her dog's name was Dog. It ended up being Doug, and I thought it was Dog. So I'm like,
hey, Doug, come here.
You named your dog Dog? And she's like, what? And he starts laughing, and I start laughing. She's like, no, his name is Doug. Yeah. I'm like,
where's the dick going to pull out?
I'm like, what the hell is going on? So you never know what you're going to see in the woods. So we end up going off on this deer, so we're laughing about what had just happened. And this deer starts doing some button hooks, and we're like, all right, time to get serious. And he's behind me, and I'm in the lead, so I'm following the tracks, and we get up around the stone wall, and it's kind of icy. He steps on the stone wall, and there he goes in front of me. He looked like a seal flying down the side of that hill. Oh, my God, I never laughed so hard in all my life.
I got the gun up trying to hold it. My other arms flopped back, and I just kept going.
Yeah. Yeah, look like a seal. He went right by me. I'm like, hey,
We blew
you
it
in
for
the
a
lead?
while.
You in the
though.
lead now?
We were laughing so hard. The hunt was over for a bit.
Start over again.
Yeah, we did. We laughed about it. But you know what the funny part about it is that's the part I love about hunting with my buddies.
Yeah.
And you go out there, you have fun. It's making memories every day. They're
what it is.
ribbing
Yeah,
each
I mean,
other.
the moral
you
of
know?
all of
Making
this
mo-
is
making
memories,
memories.
and
Memories,
having
big
fun.
stuff.
I mean,
Calling
that's-
everybody their pet names.
right.
Oh, yeah.
It's like all the pictures on the wall. We first came in, we're seeing all these pictures on the wall. And you know what? You
There's
don't
not
know.
giant bucks on
It
there.
doesn't have to be.
No,
It-
but
it could
that's
be-
our thing, though.
But that's
Shooting a
the thing.
big buck's a bonus.
Yeah.
I mean,
You know what I
everything
mean?
else is what
I
it's
got two
about.
bonuses.
But the thing is, every deer that you harvest is a giant in my book.
Yeah,
it doesn't make a
absolutely.
difference. You know what I mean? So anybody who says that I've got to shoot a 150 in order to be a big buck hunter, I'd tell them straight to the face that you're hunting for the wrong reasons.
No.
We've been very fortunate to harvest some of the deer we've harvested, but I'm going to be honest with you.
Takes time.
If it had been a smaller buck, we probably would have harvested it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And nowadays we're kind of picky on some of the stuff, but we have
you can
time.
be, though.
But we have time to be in the woods.
Yeah.
There's
and that's
no
the other
doubt
thing.
we started off shooting everything.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I've killed a ton of spike horns, a ton of smaller deer. I mean, that's what leads you to be successful, though. You can't just
You got to learn it.
You got to
Yeah,
harvest
you're
a
not
deer.
gonna, if you're going to go in the woods and be like, oh, I'm only shooting a monster, then, I mean, around here, good luck. I mean,
Yeah.
it doesn't happen like that all the time.
Or you get to people, you know what? And I think it's great. I mean, we spent a lot of time in the woods, right? And I'm going to be honest with you. Last year, I didn't harvest a big buck with my rifle or my bow or anything. I harvested a decent buck, but with some of the bucks that we were seeing on camera and the ones that I was really being selective to harvest, I didn't. But yet I told myself at the end of the day, this is what I want to harvest. If I don't harvest it, that's fine. But I'll tell you this, when it came to shooting does and stuff like that, to fill the freezer or donate some deer, we always donate deer to the Food for Hungry. And LaFlemme's butcher shop, we can drop them off there. And he takes care of LaFlemme's. It's over in Arundel. You drop them off. He takes care of everything. And the meat gets 100% donated to the food shelters. So every year when we harvest our first few deer, we always bring them over there and give them to him
That's
to give
awesome.
to the food shelters. Because
That's awesome.
one of the things that we believe in, and one of the things I was always taught young from my grandfather, is always give back more than you take, right? And that's a good philosophy, I think, a lifelong lesson that everybody should think about. You give back more than you take. You know what I mean? Help teach people. And we believe in that, and we do. We donate a lot of deer every year. And I was fortunate enough to harvest a lot of deer last year. But, at the end of the day, I like to deer hunt. I
Right.
like to
Yeah.
eat deer. I love the idea of harvesting a deer. So to me, you don't have to shoot a 200-pound deer to get that same excitement. I get the same excitement shooting a
doe.
doe. It doesn't make a difference to me. It's all the same. That my heart is pounding when I see them.
I mean, expanded archery helps me too, though,
Yeah.
to kind of get the
Jitters
get
out.
the jitters
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
I'll shoot. I don't care if I shoot a smaller buck when I'm in expanded. I don't care if I shoot a bunch of does. Like he said, we donate the meat, or I keep meat for me. But then when it comes time for rifle season, which is my bread and butter, tracking.
Yeah,
and
you've got a few
calling,
weeks under your belt already.
Yeah.
Right.
I got a few weeks, and then
Kinda
if
know
I'm
how
seeing
it-
smaller deer, I don't get that. Ooh, should I
first
shoot?
one every year,
I
yeah.
let them go. I mean, like I said, I counted this year was the first time I actually tallied it, and I passed up 14 deer, which for me is very hard. I
Yeah.
like to shoot deer.
Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
what
No, I hear
really
you.
do. But it benefited. I mean, it
Yeah.
paid off. I shot that, a couple really nice smashing deer.
Yeah.
But,
Good deer. Good deer. But what's funny is you have years like that. So the year before was my year. I harvested 2 really big bucks the year before. Last year, I harvested 2 decent bucks, and Justin, he harvested 2 monster bucks.
Right.
And you kind of go in cycles. Unless you're Mutsy and you kill a giant
Yeah, I
buck
was
every
going to say,
year.
where's Mutsy at?
Mutsy,
Yeah,
Mutsy kills a
Mutsy.
big buck every year. See, like he's the
The
quiet
gap-
we
one.
haven't heard you. Let's hear it.
Well, I know. I'm just anyway. Back to a little bit further back, like everybody's like happy shooting a decent deer. So when my
Mutsy's
son was
not.
growing up, so he's been hunting a few years now, and I think we're dragging out a deer and stuff, and we come across a big rub on a tree, and I'm like, I says, the deer that did that is bigger than this one.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, yeah. I said, that's fine, until you get a few deer under your belt. You don't want to push a kid too much when he's young. Let him shoot a handful of deer, then finally let him step his game up a little bit.
Right.
And that's kind of like, he goes, well, Dad, I don't have as much time as you got. I said, but you got to make the best of the time that you do
Right,
have.
Mutsy's a deer connoisseur. He
is.
won't shoot a small deer. Mutsy only waits for big deer.
I
Can you-
play the wind
he
110%.
does shoot a big deer.
Before
every
you-
year.
Points are bigger.
Before you get into the
Mutsy plays the wind, and he shoots For as long as I've known him, he's shot a monster every year.
It's just
We're running
Just
on
playing the
what
wind.
do we got for time?
You got an
now?
hour and a half.
Okay, so
Jeez.
Mutzi, can I hear your first like memorable the hunt that you had, like as far back as you can go, and then after
I shot
like,
my
your most
first
memorable.
nice buck. I was 12 years old.
Yeah.
And
Jeez,
using
from
my
12
dad's
years
old
old.
20 gauge shotgun.
So that
with
was in
slugs.
1930?
1970.
Something old ago.
He kind of dropped me off. We're not far apart. Yeah, just sit over here. And I'm like, and I didn't know north from south. I'm just a
Yeah.
kid. But I'll just sit there, and all of a sudden this buck comes by. I'm like, oh my God, look at that. I pick up this big, heavy shotgun. The thing's wiggling around, and I let one fly, and I dropped him right there.
No
I'm like,
way.
Wow. Yeah, it was probably like 170,
Yeah.
roughly. I
Luck
can't
started.
remember. So I'm like, wow, that's cool.
What year was that? You think?
1970.
1970.
So the next year comes
So wait,
around.
was this in what state?
Maine.
Maine.
Yeah.
Okay. So
I've
this
only
is
started
right
hunting in New
Maine.
Hampshire
I
with
think,
these guys
yeah,
in the last
before
3
Maine was developed,
4
I
years,
think.
maybe.
Yeah.
No shit.
So the next year, I go with my dad, and the same thing. You gonna be all set here? Yeah, because you're supposed to be in sight. But he wasn't that far away.
Right. Yeah.
Grandpa, yeah.
And I hear a shot. Geez, I about jump. So I just holding the gun. Here comes this deer running right at me, head on, and I'm like, I'm shaking like crazy. I thought this deer was gonna run me over.
Yeah.
And I shot that deer like 10 feet from me.
No shit.
And it was my dad had just shot at it, and he had just winged it,
Mm-hmm.
and it was just on an adrenaline run, and it came to
Come
me.
right to you.
So here I am now. I'm 11. I've got a 7 and an 8-pointer,
Ready
and
to
I'm
go
just a
from
little
there.
kid
You
with
got
this
younger?
You're
with
going
this
back.
with this old 20 gauge shotgun.
Yeah.
Yeah, he lost a year.
Yeah, you lost
Yeah.
it. Yeah, it's all right.
Yeah. So, and then after that, I just go, and I was pretty lucky to get one every year, but I just could never get in one of those big ones that you see. You see somebody that get a big one, like, wow, I wish I could get a deal like
Right.
that. And I don't know, I probably was in 30 or so before I said, you know what? I've shot enough deer now, or I got to start focusing and trying to get a nice full rack, 8 or bigger or something
Right,
like that.
right.
Let's add, too, that Monty does not hunt from the ground. He only tree stand hunts.
No, I will do, because I do a lot of scouting, trail cameras, so that once I get going, every tree stand I have has a name,
Yeah.
and I have all the wind directions, the best ones for the hunter, all written on a paper, because I got them in my head.
Yeah,
did
that,
you-
that
how
paper's
did
in a
you-
safe.
And
So
I will,
you picked those wind directions over years, though, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
so that's the only way you determine
like
that.
a spot that I found, wow, this is a nice spot for a tree stand. I'll put a camera there first, because I don't want to go through all the work of making shooting lanes and stuff, and it's not in a good spot.
Yeah.
So when I do start getting pictures that are like, wow, this is a good spot.
Let's go check some wind.
Yep, and then that's when I kind of look at the wind first to see if it's going to be good, because northwest is usually predominant.
Predominant wind. Yep.
And so I try to feed off of that. But I've got some places where it's like you need wind out of the southwest. I'm like, ugh. So I just wait. And I want to go there. My other spots aren't.
You're waiting for a day.
Yeah, the right wind on a 8
So
day.
he
And
just hunts the wind.
so,
Yeah,
Very badly.
but you have,
different
but I
ones.
have
Yeah, that
several
is way
stands where I'm
different. That
not
is-
sitting home. Well, it's not in the right direction, so I'm
Oh,
going to
okay,
sleep
I
in
see what
today.
you're saying.
Right.
I mean, I have other options, and that's just worked for me really good. But once it gets down towards like muzzleloader in Maine is last,
Yeah.
I'll sit in a little bit, but then that's when I start walking.
Right.
I think you guys were in Massachusetts
Yeah, we
a
killed
couple
that
years
one.
ago.
Yep.
When I finally got that deer, I'm like, phew.
But what are you just like poking though? You were just like
Yeah,
a
I'd
little bit of
walk. Yeah, I'd walk along, and I just lean up against a tree. But I always stop, kind of in the shadows.
Licks his
instead
finger,
of,
puts it in the air,
instead of
checks
being
the
out
wind.
like in the wide open to get picked off.
northwest,
And I'll lean up against a tree, and I'll just kind of just scan.
And you're still checking your wind. Is that-
Yeah, I'll kind of, I'm quartering or head on would be
Yeah.
perfect, but because every step you take is a different view.
Right.
Right.
And
That's what they
if
say
you
about
got fresh
snowing.
tracks on the ground, it just stopped snowing at 4 a.m. These tracks are fresh; they're not old.
Right.
Now I would just do 20 feet, stop, or get to a spot where I can get a little bit of cover. And those guys, they were going hunting. Oh, you'll get one, you'll get one. They kept saying,
We
"Don't-"
both told you you're going to
Yeah.
kill one.
And I'm like, man, I'm sweating here,
Right.
It's like this is the latest I've ever had to go.
Yeah.
And I'm on these tracks, and this place is loaded. I'm just stopping. I'm like we talked about earlier, trying to sort it out because there was a bunch. I'm leaning against this tree. I look to my right, and here comes this buck, nose right on the ground, coming like quartering to me to go by. I'm like, oh my God, look at that. The wind blowing
coming
just right in my
together.
face.
Perfect.
So I just cocked the hammer back, and he just walked through an opening.
Oh, my
boom,
God.
got him.
So the deer was
I-
traveling with the wind.
Yeah.
Yeah, no
Yep.
shit.
I will tell you this, though. So, Mutzi, I've known Mutzi ever since I was a little kid. And the area that he hunts, I used to hunt when I was a kid. That's where I actually cut my teeth, was shooting deer in that area. But they've kind of butchered that whole area up.
Yeah, it's getting tougher.
But the respect that I have for this man and the
Yeah.
area that he hunts and the caliber of deer that he puts in, the time, I would go blow right through there, and I'd be sitting in there, and I'd probably shoot something. But at the same time, I know I'd mess Mutzi up.
Right.
I have not hunted in that spot in probably the last 15 years because I know that he hunts there exclusively and kills big deer out of there, and I don't want to be the reason why
Blow
he
it
doesn't
up.
kill his deer
Right.
in that area.
I wouldn't
And-
mind.
but I don't do that because
going in there.
I respect, I have the utmost respect for hunters in general, but
Yeah.
I have a lot of respect for Mutzi and the things that I've learned from him, and I just couldn't do that.
We all hunt together in per se. We hang out after and stuff, but we all have our own ways and our own things.
Everybody's got their own little, like a secret or favorites type of spot
Right.
that they like to go
Yeah.
just on their own kind
Right,
of.
yeah.
Yeah, this is the most I've heard about Mutzi's. I want to keep talking. Ask more questions.
You think
Write it
that
down.
a lot of people run into a problem by just moving through the woods too quickly? Like, say for us, for an example, maybe we just, the way you guys sound like you hunt, you guys just, like you said, you take a while to get 200 yards.
long. Time.
Yeah. If you
We
look at
poke,
if you look at a
We
map
cover ground.
and you have an idea where you want to go, I know we have a habit of rushing, not
Rushing through
not
an
rushing.
area, I
Like
guess.
we're still taking
I
our
guess,
time, but not like you said.
yeah, you're waiting 30 minutes and then making a move.
Yeah, and I mean the main reason I do that when there's no snow on the ground is I learned from tracking
Yeah.
that we walk by deer all the time. I can't tell you how many bucks
you're right, yeah.
we have had from
Blow
here to
up
the
right next
chair,
to you.
just or not move. No, not move at all. We see them; they don't see us, or vice versa. They see us, but they're hoping we don't see them.
Right.
And I mean they're right there. So when there's no snow on the ground, imagine how well they blend in.
Right,
So
correct.
I'm constantly scanning and looking for antlers. That's how I've killed a lot of deer. Is just there's an antler right there.
You'll catch an ear or a tail
Yeah.
flicker or
Most
just-
people, they look for the whole deer. And it was funny. I was
No,
telling my
yeah,
wife this.
you're only going to see pieces.
Exactly. My wife, we were out hunting. She's like,
Yeah,
I was
that's
like,
true.
there's a deer over there. There's a deer right there. And she's like, how the hell are you seeing all these deer? And I'm like, I'm not actually looking for the deer. I'm looking for something that's, most everything in the woods is vertical, right? Up and
Right.
down.
You're right.
These things, they're
Horizontal.
horizontal. So if you see something that's horizontal, I
gonna-
key in on it, like, wait a minute. And I might see, like he said, a tail, an ear, or an antler, or a part of an antler.
Yep.
And those are the things that if you really key on them, you'll see a lot more deer.
Right.
When you're looking for the whole deer, chances are you're not going to do it. Especially when you're tracking. If you're tracking and you're looking for that deer bedded down, you may only see an antler. or
It's
something.
going to be covered in snow.
Well, perfect
regardless.
example is last year, or this year, I should say, that big buck I was tracking the last day in New Hampshire. I only saw its ear, and then, because I saw a little flicker, so I stopped, brought my gun up, and then I could see its wet nose. I could see its breathing and everything. I waited, got my shot. I rushed it, by the way. I didn't kill it. But there was snow on the ground, and when I shot, 9 deer stood up. I didn't see
You didn't
any
see
of those
any?
other deer,
No.
and
No shit. Yeah.
I was 35 yards. I bet
That's a
from these
great
deer.
point. Yeah.
So
Yeah, you're
that stuff
keeping-
right there is what I think about when I'm moving through bare ground when there's no snow or I'm calling is
They don't have to get up. They don't have to blow. They don't have to.
And a lot of
Yeah.
times a big mature buck will not get up. If he knows you don't see him,
Wait
he's
till
just
you know
not going to
the vibe
move. Yeah, he's just not going to move. I mean, I shot one time standing in a pine, like a hemlock. It was just standing in there. It was really windy, 30-mile-an-hour winds probably. That's one at the cemetery I got there with a shotgun you sold me.
I know right where that is.
So you got 2 lucky guns now?
Right.
From me? All right.
But that deer was, again, like 35 feet from me.
Right.
And it was just standing in that, and it didn't think I saw it, but it did. I kind of pretended I didn't see it, and then the last second I turned and shot. And I dropped it right there. But if I would have been just poking along and not paying attention, I'd have walked right by that deer,
Right.
you know?
My dad shot one right on the back side of the like right on pretty much the cemetery, walking right where you're saying.
They like cemeteries.
I know. I don't know. I don't get that little spot where you're talking about. It's just like a perfect little.
But Mutzi brought up a good point also is, different when you move 5 feet, you see a different perspective, right?
Oh, yeah.
Right.
I'll never forget
Huge.
a big buck I shot.
true.
If
up
you're
on-
in thick places that have been cut where the undergrowth is
Yeah.
8-10 years old now, it's thick. So when you do get to a gap where you can look,
Well, I had this over in Maine. It was the day after Thanksgiving. We had some snow. I was up on Wigan Mountain, and it's a big ridge area. And I was tracking this one buck, and I get up on there, and I stopped to tie my shoe. My boot had come untied. I bent down to tie it, and when I was looking down through the hemlocks, I see him about 50 yards away, laying down under a hemlock, looking at me. I couldn't believe it. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So I quickly, I forget about the boot. I pull my rifle up. I had to move off to the side a little bit. I move off to the side a little bit. The deer stands up. I fire. Well, at that time, I fired. He took off running. I dinged 3 more at him, and, the hunt really began at that point.
Right.
And I ended up finishing that deer up, but I thought about it. If I had kept on walking on his track, the way that the branches were all laid down with snow, I never would have seen him till I got by him, and he would have bounced out. Because my boot, for whatever reason, thanks to lucky stars, I had to tie my boot. I looked, and there he is. But it worked out. And I think of little things like that. And sometimes when we're tracking, when you're going, I'll stand down and I'll bend down and look around just to kind of see the perspective from where they are laying down. What are they seeing? But those bucks are always looking at their backtrack.
Right. Big time.
All right, I think we're at time here. We need to have you guys come back on.
I'd love to.
We need to come.
I'd love to.
We need
I
to
got a lot more to talk
Had a good
about.
time.
back on.
It's been good.
Drink some more beers. That's for sure.
Yeah, man.
I know, you
Social
stop. What's up with that?
social
Grape
media.
juice is getting to me.
Where can people find you if they want to follow you? On you on Facebook?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook. Not on Instagram yet, but I am on Facebook. I just got onto that last year. We got a few sponsors that are sponsoring us, so we kind of try to promote some of that stuff.
What's your name so people can follow you?
Nathan Fenderson.
Okay. And
Justin Thibodeau. Yep. Same
Thibodeau.
deal. I'm on Facebook. Yep.
Yeah.
Mutz.
What are you
Mutzi's
talking
not
about?
on
Come
Facebook.
on.
Yeah, hey, you got
Old-fashioned.
an iPhone.
Old-fashioned.
1930 iPhone.
Mutzi's on OnlyFans, so
Mutzi has one of those rotary phones.
Yeah. Send me a text. Best I can do.
all right, excellent. I appreciate you guys
You can
coming
reach
over.
Mutzi through me on Nate anytime.
Yeah.
If you have any questions, cool. All right, guys, thank you.
Cool.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Been a pleasure.
We got friends in the next town. Yeah, baby, when we're together, it's like Vegas times 3. But in the morning, I'll know better. 'Cause you're so bad for me. Yeah, oh baby, when we're together, it's like Vegas times 3. But in the morning, I'll know better. 'Cause you're so bad for me. You're so bad for me. 'Cause you're so bad for me.